I don't know the exact moment my family stopped seeing me as a daughter and started seeing me as a threat, but I can tell you the day I finally admitted it to myself. I was 34, a woman old enough to understand consequences, old enough to know that sometimes the people who should love you the most are the ones who learn how to wound you with the smallest gestures. I remember standing in my tiny kitchen, staring at the chipped white mug in my hands, thinking about how ridiculous it was that something so ordinary could be the only thing keeping me grounded. There was something comforting about its cracks, imperfections that never tried to hide. I wish I could say the same about my family. My name is Elise Warren, and I grew up believing that love had to be earned, chased, bargained for, negotiated like some fragile contract that could be revoked at any moment. I didn't realize until much later that this belief wasn't normal. It was inherited like a curse passed down quietly tucked behind forced smiles, and we're doing fine family photos. If I close my eyes now, I can still see the house I grew up in. The mint green shutters my mother insisted on repainting every spring. The porch swing that squeaked on humid nights. The kitchen table where my father sat towering over everything and everyone, his silence always louder than his shouting. Most people assume the loudest families are the most broken. But sometimes the quiet ones, the ones with perfectly ironed shirts and rehearsed small talk, carry wounds so deep they leave no visible scars. I didn't understand that until I was much older. I was the eldest daughter, the one who was supposed to smooth things over, absorb the tension, hold everyone else together. Maybe that's why I never learned how to hold myself. Even now, telling this story, it feels strange, even shameful, to admit how invisible I allowed myself to become. But if I don't say it, if I don't speak it out loud, then the truth stays buried the way they wanted it to be. The beginning of all of this, or maybe the beginning of the end, started on a cloudy afternoon last fall. The air had that brittle chill, the kind that makes your bones ache before winter even arrives. I was sitting at my desk, editing a series of photographs I'd taken for a small art magazine. Photography had become my refuge over the years, the only place where I could control the frame, the lighting, the story. Unlike my life, my camera never lied to me. My phone buzzed with a message. I glanced at it without thinking, expecting a client or a reminder. But the sender's name froze me in place. Mother. The text was short, too short. You shouldn't come to the house anymore. It's better for all of us if you stay away for a while. I read it once, then twice, then 10 more times, each repetition carving a deeper line into my chest. No explanation, no warmth, no attempt to soften the blow, just a clean severing, a dismissal. As if I were an employee being quietly let go. For a minute I thought it was a mistake. Maybe she meant something else. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe my father had said something offhand and she was trying to relay it badly. My mother had always been like that, soft-spoken, cautious, constantly smoothing the edges of my father's sharpness. But as I sat there, my thumb trembling above the screen, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: clarity. They didn't want me back. Not for dinner, not for holidays, not for anything. And the most painful part wasn't the rejection itself. It was the realization that I wasn't even surprised. I didn't reply. Not then. Not for hours. I sat in the dim light of my apartment, letting the silence wrap around me like an old blanket I'd sworn I'd thrown away years ago. My mind went places, old places I'd avoided revisiting. I remembered being 13, standing in the hallway while my father told me I was too dramatic. I remembered being 17, crying in my room after he dismissed the art scholarship I'd worked years for. I remembered being 29, sitting alone at Thanksgiving while my younger sister Claire, the golden child, announced her engagement, and everyone forgot I was even there. Claire. God, even thinking her name sent a twisting ache through my ribs. She was the sun in our family, the one my parents orbited around. She could do no wrong. She could fail spectacularly, and they'd still call it growth. I could succeed quietly, and they'd call it luck. But none of that compared to the betrayal that would follow. When I finally gathered myself enough to respond, I typed a single word. Okay. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. Something inside me went cold, but not in a cruel way. More like a survival instinct, like my body suddenly understood that begging was beneath me now. I owed them nothing. Not anymore. It was strange. With that one word, it felt like I had finally stepped out of a shadow I hadn't even realized I'd been living in. 2 days passed before I heard anything again. The call came from an unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it, but something inside me nudged me to answer. Maybe it was intuition. Or maybe it was the fact that I had nothing left to lose. Elise Warren, a man asked, his voice formal, almost rehearsed. Yes, this is Anthony Keller. I'm the attorney representing your parents. The world seemed to tilt. Attorney. Why on earth would my parents need an attorney to speak to me? I'm calling regarding the property documents you signed 10 years ago. I shut my eyes, trying desperately to remember what he was talking about. A decade ago, I was 24, lost, financially struggling, still trying to make a life outside the home they pretended to support me leaving. I remembered a stack of papers, something about refinancing the house. My father had insisted I co-sign. Family helps family, he said. It'll be quick, he said. Just a signature, he said. I had signed because I was naive. Because I was desperate for his approval. Because when a daughter wants to be loved, she will bend until she breaks. I'm not sure I understand, I said carefully. There have been complications, the attorney continued. Your parents weren't completely transparent with you regarding that refinancing agreement. Of course they weren't. But nothing prepared me for what he said next. You're actually listed as the primary owner of the property. My heart slammed against my ribs. No, that can't be right, I whispered. The documents are legally binding. And due to recent financial issues, your parents need your signature to prevent the house from entering foreclosure. The world grew unbearably still. It hit me then. The text, the rejection, the sudden exile. They hadn't cast me out because they were angry. They cast me out because they needed something from me but couldn't stomach asking. They didn't want me home unless they could take something from me. A hollow, sickening heaviness filled my chest. Betrayal layered over betrayal. I felt suddenly weightless, like the ground beneath me had been yanked away. And I was falling through memories I hadn't healed from. Elise, the attorney asked, sensing my silence. I swallowed hard. Why didn't they tell me? That, he said quietly, is something only they can answer. But deep down, I already knew the answer. Because in their eyes, I was never a daughter. I was a resource, a tool, a signature they could exploit, a name they could slap on paperwork when their own financial irresponsibility caught up to them. My knees felt weak. I lowered myself onto the couch, pressing a trembling hand to my forehead. All I could think was, they buried me alive before they even realized I could fight my way out. The attorney went on explaining details, legal jargon, options, consequences, but I didn't hear most of it. My mind was somewhere else, somewhere far darker, somewhere deep within that hollow space inside me I'd tried so hard to fill over the years. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time staring at nothing. Then slowly, deliberately, I whispered aloud to the empty room. They really thought I would stay quiet forever, and in that moment something inside me shifted. Not anger, not revenge, not yet. Just awakening, a stirring. A realization that after a lifetime of bending, maybe just maybe it was finally my turn to stand tall. I don't know how long I sat there after the call, trapped between disbelief and the kind of clarity that only comes when your illusions finally collapse. It felt like someone had cracked open my chest and poured cold water straight onto my heart, shocking it awake. The apartment around me was still so still I could hear the faint hum of my old refrigerator, the distant buzz of traffic outside, even the soft ticking of the clock I'd hung above the kitchen table. The world didn't care that my life had just shifted in a way I wasn't prepared for. Everything kept moving. But I stayed frozen, suspended in a moment that felt like the turning point I'd always sensed was coming but never wanted to face. I wasn't ready to believe what the attorney had said. It didn't feel real. How could I, the daughter they dismissed, the daughter they told to stay away, be the primary owner of the house? My father would never give someone like me that kind of control. He didn't even trust me to choose the right college major, let alone co-sign something as serious as a property. But then I remembered that day 10 years ago, how tired I'd been, how eager I was to finally prove myself to be useful, to be wanted. He'd shoved a folder of papers toward me, tapped his finger on the signature line, and told me it was nothing but a formality. I'd believed him. And now, a decade later, the truth was crawling out from under all the lies. I took my camera bag from under the desk and began sorting lenses, wiping fingerprints, tightening screws. When I didn't know what to do with my emotions, I did this. I worked with my hands. I focused on angles and clarity and fixing things I actually knew how to fix. After a while, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Claire. My heart stuttered. I hadn't heard her voice in months, not since she canceled our plans for the third time in a row, because her fiancé's family invited them to brunch. She always had reasons that sounded gentle on the surface but underneath whispered the same truth: Elise, you're not a priority. I let the call go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification popped up, a voice message. My hands trembled slightly as I pressed play. Elise, I don't know what's happening, but Mom is crying and Dad is losing his mind. Just call me. Okay, I'm sure it's a misunderstanding. I closed my eyes. Misunderstanding. That was always her role. The mediator. The translator. The one who explained away their cruelty with soft excuses because she never had the courage to call it what it was. I didn't blame her. Not entirely. We were raised in the same house, just cast in different roles. She was the child they praised, protected, placed on a pedestal. I was the one they trained to carry their weight. And like a pack mule, I did it willingly, because I thought love was measured by how much I could tolerate. The message continued, Claire's voice trembling just enough to make me wonder if she was actually scared, or if it was just another performance born from habit. Please call me. We need to talk. I deleted it. Not out of pettiness, but because for once in my life their panic wasn't my responsibility. That realization felt foreign, almost dangerous. I stood up and walked to the window. The sky outside had darkened, bruised with clouds, as if mirroring the heaviness inside my chest. Streetlights flickered to life, casting warm halos against the cold pavement. People walked below with grocery bags, children's backpacks, briefcases, living small, ordinary moments untouched by betrayal. And I felt a strange ache, a longing for that simplicity to be a person whose family didn't hold their love like a dangling reward. My phone buzzed again. This time a text from my mother. Elise, please call. We need to speak. Your father is furious. Not worried, not remorseful, not apologetic. Furious. Even in crisis, he managed to make everything about himself. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned away from the window and paced the room, my fingers pressing into my palms, grounding myself. Part of me wanted to scream to demand answers, to call them, and let years of swallowed hurt explode through the phone. But I didn't trust myself to talk yet. If I spoke now, it would be from the rawest, most wounded place inside me, and I didn't want them to have access to that anymore. They had taken enough. That night, I barely slept. I replayed old memories, the kind I'd always brushed aside, calling them normal, even though some part of me knew they weren't. I remembered being 7, holding up a drawing I'd spent hours making. A watercolor of our house, crooked and messy and full of love, at least how I imagined love should look. My father had barely glanced at it before saying, "The perspective is off." My sister had drawn a stick figure with a crown that same week, and he'd taped it to the fridge like it was the Mona Lisa. I remembered being 15, overhearing my parents whispering behind a closed door. My mother had said Elise is sensitive, and my father had replied, "She's dramatic. She needs thicker skin," as if empathy were a flaw, as if feeling deeply were something shameful. I remembered being 20, calling home from my tiny dorm room, excited to share that one of my professors said my photography had potential. My father had sighed and told me to stop chasing childish hobbies and study something useful instead. And even then, even with tears threatening to spill, I'd thanked him, as if breaking my spirit were a kindness. But the memory that hit me hardest, the one that came back like a slap, was from 3 years ago. My mother had called in tears because my father needed help with medical bills, and I'd sent money I didn't have. When I followed up months later, he told me, "You shouldn't expect a thank you for doing what family is supposed to do." Family, their favorite word, a word they only used when I had something to offer them. Now they needed something again. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't rushing to give it to them. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of purpose. My eyes were swollen, my throat thick from unshed tears, but my mind felt sharper than it had in years. Something inside me had settled, a quiet resolve that didn't feel like rage but like truth. A truth I'd avoided for far too long. I brewed a cup of coffee, wrapped myself in the thick gray sweater I'd knitted last winter, and sat at the table with my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before I finally typed, "Property ownership documents, legal rights when listed as primary owner." The search results were a maze of jargon, but one thing became clear: the attorney had been telling the truth. Unless I willingly transferred ownership or signed new agreements, the house was legally mine. Mine. The word felt strange, almost dangerous, resting on my tongue. I wasn't sure what scared me more, the power I suddenly held, or the possibility that for once I could actually use it. By the time the sun appeared pale and shy behind the clouds, my phone rang again. This time I answered. Elisa, man's voice asked. It wasn't the attorney, it was my father. Hearing him say my name felt like being dragged backward through time, through every wound, every slight, every moment. I tried to make myself small enough to survive his indifference. "I hear you've made some decisions," he said, his tone clipped, controlled, his pride bleeding through every syllable. "No," I replied softly. "The decisions were made 10 years ago. You just didn't expect I'd ever find out." A heavy silence stretched across the line, thick and suffocating. Then he said the sentence that broke something in me so cleanly I felt the snap in my bones. "You owe us a lease." I closed my eyes. "No," I whispered. "I don't." He exhaled sharply, the sound dripping with disbelief. "You're really going to do this? You're going to punish your family over paperwork you barely understood?" I felt something ignite inside me, not fire, not fury, but clarity. "You told me not to come home," I said quietly. "You made that decision very clear." Another silence, this one colder, harder. "Elise, don't be stupid," he hissed. And just like that, something inside me lifted, rose, untangled itself from years of conditioning. "I'm done being spoken to like that," I said, voice steady, almost eerily calm. "I'm not a child anymore." He didn't respond. So I ended the call. My hand shook slightly as I set the phone down, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left begging. I wasn't the one left apologizing. I wasn't the one left hurting alone in silence. Now it was their turn to face the truth they'd spent years pretending they could outrun. And I wasn't finished yet. I thought cutting the call would make me feel guilty, but it didn't, not the way I'd spent years trained to expect. There was no instant urge to call back and apologize just for existing, no crushing panic that I'd gone too far. Instead, there was a quiet ringing in my ears, like the air after a storm, when the thunder has finally rolled away, and all that's left is the raw silence of what's been stripped bare. I stared at my phone for a long time, the last screen still faintly glowing. Call ended. It felt like those two words belonged to more than the conversation. They felt like a label for a chapter of my life. I didn't realize I'd started crying until a tear slid past my lips, salty and warm, cutting through the numbness on my face. I brushed it away almost irritably. I'd cried so many times over them, silent tears in bathrooms, muffled sobs into pillows, dizzy spells in parking lots after one of his cutting remarks. I didn't want to give them that anymore. Not my tears, not my nights, not my breath. Eh? But grief is strange. It doesn't ask permission, it just rises. I folded my arms on the table and lowered my head, pressing my forehead against my sleeves. For a few minutes, I let myself break. Not the way I used to with begging and bargaining and promises to be better, but in a quieter way. It was like mourning someone who had died a long time ago, and I was only now attending the funeral. Because the truth was the parents I wished I had never existed. Only the ones who used me did. When I finally straightened, my neck stiff and my eyes sore, I knew what I had to do. If I didn't make a decision, they would. They always did, and their decisions had written over my life long enough. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of the attorney, Anthony Keller. He answered on the second ring, voice measured professional. Ms. Warren, good morning. It's Elise, I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. I've spoken to my father. I see, he replied, and I heard something like tension under his neutrality. And how did that go? I let out a humorless laugh. You're an attorney. I'm sure you've heard every flavor of denial and manipulation. He didn't say anything for a second, then sighed. I'm sorry you're going through this. The sympathy in his tone almost undid me. It had been so long since anyone acknowledged that what I was going through was actually painful, that I wasn't just too sensitive or overreacting. I've been looking into the documents, I said, clearing my throat. If I am indeed the primary owner, what are my options? Your options, he repeated, and I heard paper rustling, a chair creaking. Legally, you have the right to retain ownership, transfer it, or enter into a new agreement with your parents. Practically, however, he trailed off, choosing his words carefully. Practically, you have leverage. Leverage. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and unfamiliar. My family had been holding leverage over me my entire life, emotional, financial, psychological. Now I had something they wanted, something they needed. And they hated that. This is their home, I said quietly. The house I grew up in. I don't want to destroy them. Saying the words felt like admitting a crime I hadn't committed yet. No one is forcing you to, he said gently. But you also don't owe them your own destruction to spare theirs. My throat tightened. He continued. The reality is simple. They put you in this position when they signed those papers without explaining what they meant. That's not your fault. You have every right to protect yourself. Protect myself. I'd spent so much energy protecting their feelings, their image, their comfort, that the idea of turning that instinct inward felt almost selfish, indulgent, like I was breaking a rule written in invisible ink on my heart. You are only allowed to exist in ways that serve them. I took a breath. If I decided to keep the house under my control, what would that look like? Well, he replied, his tone shifting into logistical mode. First, we would file the appropriate documents affirming your ownership, then issue formal communication to your parents regarding their status. Depending on whether you choose to let them stay, you could offer a rental agreement, a buyout, or request that they vacate. Let them stay. Offer. Request that they vacate. They were such clinical phrases for something that to me was soaked in history and hurt. This wasn't just a property. This was the place where I'd learned to make myself small. The place where my father's voice could silence a room with a single cough. The place where my mother's eyes always flicked downward whenever I needed her to look at me and say, "You're enough." Can I think about it, I asked. Of course, he said. Take the time you need. But I'll be honest with you, Ms. Warren, based on what I've seen of their financial situation, they're running out of time. I ended the call and stared at the ceiling, breathing slowly, trying to keep my heart from racing out of my chest. They were running out of time. For once, that wasn't my emergency. Hours passed. I walked around my apartment, touching small things that grounded me. The coffee mug, the framed print of a photograph I'd taken in a rain-soaked street, the plant I'd somehow managed not to kill. I opened my portfolio and flipped through images strangers caught in moments of rawness and beauty. Cities at dusk, empty playgrounds at sunrise. I'd captured so many stories, but never my own. At some point, my phone vibrated again. Another text from Claire. Elise, I'm coming over. Please don't ignore me. I stared at the screen. For years, I would have responded immediately. I would have worried that she was upset with me, that I was being cold or unreasonable, but now all I felt was a wary curiosity. Part of me wanted to say no, to block the door, to keep this new, fragile boundary intact. Another part of me, though, needed to see her face when she explained why she'd never once told me about the house. The refinancing, the mess they'd dragged me into without consent. I sent a simple reply. Fine, I'll be here. Less than an hour later, there was a sharp knock at my door. My stomach twisted as I walked across the room. The closer I got, the more memories hit me. Braiding Claire's hair before school, letting her borrow my clothes, defending her when Dad criticized her grades. I'd always protected her. Even when she didn't ask. Even when she let me stand alone in front of our parents. I opened the door. She stood there, cheeks flushed from the cold eyes, wide and glossy blonde hair pulled into a messy bun that somehow still looked effortlessly perfect. She looked like she'd come straight out of one of those cozy lifestyle blogs, all neutral sweaters and glossy lips, except her expression was anything but curated. Elise, she breathed as if she'd run the whole way, thank God. I stepped aside without a word and she slipped in, pulling her coat tightly around herself as if my apartment were colder than it was. For a moment, we just stared at each other. You look tired, she said hesitantly. You look comfortable, I replied, and the edge in my tone surprised even me. Her face fell. Please don't start like that. This is already hard enough. Hard for who, I almost asked. Instead, I gestured toward the table. Sit. She did, perching on the edge of the chair like a guest, which struck me as ironic. I'd probably spent more nights in that house than she'd ever spend in mine. I don't understand what you're doing, she said quietly. Dad is freaking out. Mom is barely holding it together. They said you're trying to take the house. I let out a slow breath, pressing my palms flat against the table. No, I said. They took the house. 10 years ago. They took my name, my credit, my trust, and now they want me to fix what they broke. Her eyes glistened. They didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed. It was small, sharp, and sad. Claire, do you have any idea how many times I've heard that sentence? She flinched but didn't look away. I found out from a lawyer, I continued, my voice trembling despite my best effort to sound steady. Not from Dad, not from Mom, not from you. No one thought I deserved the truth. They only thought I deserved the consequence. That's not fair, she said, but even as she spoke, her voice wavered. I didn't know all the details, I knew they needed help. Dad said you would understand, that you'd sign because that's what you do. You always help. Exactly. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Do you hear yourself? You're saying that like it's a compliment. Silence pressed into the space between us. She looked down at her hands, fingers twisting together. I'm not defending them. Okay, I know they should have been honest, but they're scared, Elise. They could lose everything. I stared at her, a strange calm settling over me. Claire, I said softly, I already lost everything with them a long time ago. I just didn't realize it until they put it in writing. Her gaze snapped up to meet mine, eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears. Elise, I'm not doing this to be cruel, I continued. I'm doing this because every time they needed something, I gave it. Money, time, silence, forgiveness. And when I needed one thing, a place to belong, they sent me a text telling me to stay away. My voice broke slightly at the last word. Do you know what that does to a person? She shook her head, covering her mouth with her hand. I'm not asking you to hate them, I whispered. I'm asking you to stop asking me to destroy myself for them. She didn't answer. Outside, a car horn blared faintly. Someone shouted, a dog barked. Life went on. Inside my little apartment, my sister looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not as the resilient older sister who always had it together, but as a woman who had been bleeding quietly for years. Finally, she spoke. What are you going to do? I exhaled, the question settling heavy on my shoulders. I don't know everything yet, I said slowly. But I do know this. I'm not signing anything to make this easier for them. Not unless it's on my terms. Not unless they acknowledge what they've done. And even then, I shook my head. Even then, I don't know. Her tears finally spilled over. He'll never apologize, she whispered. You know that. I know, I replied. That's why I'm not waiting on his apology anymore. Her face crumpled, a mix of grief and confusion and something that looked dangerously like admiration. You're stronger than me, she said hoarsely. No, I said quietly. I'm just finally done being weak for them. We sat there in thick silence. Two sisters raised in the same house holding different versions of the same pain. In that moment, I realized something else, something I hadn't been prepared for. In choosing myself, I wasn't just punishing them. I was changing the story. Not just for me, maybe for her too. The moment Claire's tears began to fall, something inside me shifted, not with satisfaction, not with triumph, but with a strange, aching mixture of sorrow and recognition. For the first time in years, I saw her not as the golden child, not as the chosen one, who could do no wrong, but as another daughter, shaped by the same house that had bent me into silence. She wasn't my enemy. She was my mirror, just reflecting a different kind of damage. She wiped her cheek quickly, as if embarrassed by the cracking of her composure. Growing up, she'd been trained to stay pretty, stay pleasant, stay agreeable. Crying wasn't banned in our family. It was just quietly frowned upon, unless it served a purpose. She looked so young in that moment, younger than her 29 years, and for a second I glimpsed the child she'd once been. The one who used to crawl into my bed at night after our parents' arguments and whisper, "Can we pretend we're in a different family? Just for tonight." I wondered when she'd stopped asking. I wondered when I had. "Elise," she whispered, voice thick, "I'm scared." I swallowed hard. Of what? Of everything falling apart, she said. Of losing the house. Of losing you. Of Dad never forgiving me if I don't convince you to help him. There it was. The truth she didn't want to admit. She was caught between the suffocating pull of our father's expectations and the possibility of stepping out of the cycle. But stepping out meant risking being cast aside, and she'd watched what that exile had done to me. It terrified her. I leaned back in my chair and breathed slowly through the whirl of emotions trying to claw their way to the surface. You're not responsible for his approval, I said gently. Her eyes darted up haunted. You don't get it. He raised me to be. I felt the words like a punch, because she was right. We'd been raised differently, sculpted differently. My father had shaped me through pressure, through criticism, through withholding love until I contorted myself into something nearly unrecognizable. But Claire had been raised through expectations, through praise, with strings attached, through the brittle promise that her worth depended on staying in line, staying agreeable, staying his. Different paths, same destination. Same chains. She exhaled shakily. I don't want to choose between you and them. Then don't, I said softly. Choosing yourself isn't choosing against anyone. She shook her head, frustration and fear nodding her expression. You say that like it's easy. Do I look like it's been easy for me, I asked? Her eyes softened. No, it looks like it's breaking you. I held her gaze. Sometimes you have to let something break so you can stop holding it together alone. She pressed her lips together to stop them from trembling. I waited. Let the silence stretch. Gave her space to feel it without trying to rescue her from it. That was new for me to sit back and let someone else sit with their own discomfort instead of absorbing it. Finally, she whispered, I'm sorry. The words were so small, so quiet, but they landed with surprising force. I hadn't realized how much I'd needed to hear them, not from her specifically, but from anyone in that house. Anyone willing to acknowledge the fracture without pretending I imagined it. I know you are, I said softly. And I don't blame you for any of this, but you can't ask me to fix something they broke. She looked down at her hands again, twisting them together until her knuckles went white. Dad said if you don't sign the new documents, the bank will take the house. I nodded, yes. And if the bank takes the house, they'll have nowhere to go. A beat of silence. They didn't care that I had nowhere to go, I said quietly. The words slipped out before I could temper them, raw and sharp, but they weren't cruel. They were simply true. She flinched, her breath catching. That wasn't fair to you. No, I agreed, it wasn't. We stared at each other across the small table, the air dense, heavy with years of unspoken truths. You always protected me, she said suddenly. Even when I was awful to you, even when I ignored you, even when I acted like your pain was an inconvenience. My throat tightened. You were a kid, I said. So were you, she whispered. The apartment held a fragile silence after that one, threaded with regret, recognition, and a glimmer of something like healing. I'm not asking you to fix them, she said finally. I'm not. But I'm asking you not to destroy yourself trying to get back at them. That's what I'm scared of, Elise. Not the money, not the house. You. Her voice cracked at the last word. I felt something soften inside me, a knot I'd held onto so tightly it had become a part of me. I don't want revenge, I said quietly. I want my life back. She nodded slowly. Okay. I'm not signing anything until I decide what's right for me, I continued. Not for them, not for the past, not out of fear or guilt. For me. Claire took a shuddering breath. Okay, she whispered again. We sat together for a long time after that. Not talking, not trying to patch the wounds or force solutions, just existing in the same room for the first time in years without pretense or performance. It felt like an unfamiliar kind of peace. A small one. Fragile, but real. Eventually, she stood and slipped her coat on. Are you going to tell them what you've decided? She asked quietly. I don't know yet, I admitted. She nodded, though disappointment flickered across her face. Please, just let me know before you do anything drastic. I will, I promised. You deserve that much. She hesitated at the door, then stepped forward and hugged me. For a moment, I froze, not because I didn't want it, but because I didn't expect it. Her arms were warm, trembling slightly, and she held me like someone who had been afraid for a long time and was just now learning how to breathe freely. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were red but clearer. I love you, she said. The words felt like they were stitched with old wounds and new hope. I love you too, I whispered. Then she was gone. After the door clicked shut, I stood in the stillness of my apartment, the air vibrating with all the things we hadn't said. I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. I walked slowly to the table and sat down again. The house was mine. The decision was mine. For the first time in my life, the consequences were mine alone. That was terrifying and liberating. I stared at my phone, letting the weight of everything settle. Then I whispered to myself, it's my turn now. Whatever came next, it would be on my terms. I didn't touch my phone for the rest of the day. Not because I was avoiding them, though part of me was, but because I needed space. Real space. The kind I'd never been allowed growing up. As a child, even my thoughts felt monitored, as if any private flicker of independence might become a threat. Now sitting in my quiet apartment, the light dimming through the windows, I realized how badly I needed to hear my own mind without their voices pressing in from all sides. The dusk settled slowly, painting everything in soft purples and faded golds. I made tea, though I barely drank it. I moved through the apartment without knowing what I was looking for. Something inside me was shifting, reforming itself in ways I couldn't fully understand yet. It was like waking up after years of sleeping with one eye open. At one point, I stood by the window and watched the world move outside, neighbors, walking dogs. A couple arguing half-heartedly near the corner, a boy on a scooter weaving recklessly between parked cars. All these tiny lives unfolding without the weight of betrayal anchoring them. I felt jealous of them for a moment, then strangely grateful that at least they existed, proof that normalcy was possible somewhere. My thoughts kept circling back to the house. Not just the physical walls, but what it had meant. What it still meant. Every memory of it brought a different shade of pain. The staircase I'd cried on after our father told me he was disappointed in my college choice. The kitchen counter where I'd cut vegetables while listening to him praise Claire for something trivial I'd done years before without applause. The living room where I sat invisible while guests asked about the perfect daughter, and they meant her. But I also remembered summers with open windows. Claire and I dancing barefoot to old records, the backyard with its giant oak tree where I used to sit and imagine a version of myself who wasn't terrified of disappointing everyone. I remembered rare moments of softness, my mother brushing my hair when I was sick at 14, my father letting me steer the car on his lap when I was 6, Claire falling asleep against me during thunderstorms. The house wasn't just a collection of wounds. It was a graveyard and a cradle at once. Maybe that's why the thought of losing it or giving it back without consequence felt like ripping out a part of myself I wasn't ready to release. Around 9, I finally checked my phone. 6 missed calls from my father, 3 from my mother, 1 from Claire, just a short message. Please take care of yourself. I love you. And then 1 voicemail from an unknown number. My stomach tightened. I pressed play. Ms. Warren, a familiar voice said. Anthony, the attorney. I'm calling because your parents have contacted their legal counsel again, and it appears they're preparing new paperwork for you. They're attempting to persuade the bank to allow refinancing under your name alone. My hand froze midair. Might I suggest, he continued with careful dryness, that you do not sign anything until we have a thorough discussion. Their attorney seems anxious, and anxious attorneys tend to cut corners. The voicemail ended. I stared at the phone, my pulse thudding in my ears. Of course they were scrambling. Of course they were trying to reposition the entire burden onto me. That was their pattern when faced with consequences. They looked for the nearest person willing to carry the fallout. And I was always the one. Because they assumed I always would be. A slow, cold clarity slid through me. They didn't want me not as a daughter, not as family. They wanted access to the version of me they could exploit. The dependable girl. The fixer. The emotional sponge. The one who would break her own bones to build a bridge for them to walk across. Not anymore. I set the phone down with deliberate calm and leaned back, letting breath slowly seep out of me. When midnight approached, I found myself unable to sleep. Restlessness pushed me toward the closet where I kept my old storage boxes, photos, letters, bits of childhood tucked away like souvenirs from a life that wasn't truly mine. I pulled out a shoebox marked family. Inside were Polaroids and printed snapshots fading at the edges. There was one of me at 12 holding a science fair ribbon, grinning with innocent pride while my father stood stiffly beside me, expression blank. Another of Claire and me on a beach towel, both laughing about something forgotten. A winter picture of our family in matching sweaters. My smile forced my father's arm around Claire, not me. I held each memory in my hands, feeling its weight, its truth. And I realized something painful, something liberating. I had always been an outsider. Even in the photos where I was physically present, I was spiritually absent, trying desperately to fit into a frame that wasn't made for me. And yet here I was, finally outside the frame by choice rather than force. I put the photos aside and reached for the last thing in the box, a folded piece of paper I hadn't seen in years. My handwriting. A letter I'd written to myself at 16, assigned in a therapy group I attended after a particularly cruel year at home. It began, "Dear future me, I hope one day you stop trying to earn people who are supposed to love you for free." My breath hitched. 16-year-old me had been wiser than the woman I became. She'd known the truth before she even had the language for it. I closed my eyes and pressed the letter to my chest. "I'm trying," I whispered aloud to that girl. "I'm finally trying." When I opened my eyes, the apartment felt different, like the air had shifted, like something old had finally loosened its grip on me. I reached for my phone and opened a new message to Anthony. I typed, "Let's meet. I'm ready to discuss my next steps." I didn't mention the house. I didn't mention my parents. I didn't mention fear or guilt or obligation. Just readiness. I hit send. Afterward, I sat back and let the stillness settle again. The old version of me, the one shaped by their expectations, fed by their approval, punished by their indifference, was fading. Not gone, not yet, but dissolving like fog under a rising sun. And in the space she left behind, someone newer, quieter, stronger was emerging. Someone who didn't need validation to make decisions. Someone who didn't need permission to exist. Someone who didn't need to bend until she broke. I wasn't finished with them, and they weren't finished with me. Not yet. But for the first time, I felt like I had the right to write the story instead of being written into it. It was my turn now. And whatever happened next, it would be on my terms. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, but out of a strange, deep-rooted awakening that hummed quietly beneath my ribs. It was the first time in years that I didn't fall asleep exhausted by carrying someone else's expectations. My mind felt alert, alive, bracing for something I couldn't yet name. When dawn finally broke in streaks of pale blue across my bedroom ceiling, it felt like more than morning. It felt like a turning point. I showered slowly, letting the hot water run over my shoulders, grounding myself in the present moment. So much of my life had been lived in reaction, reacting to my father's temper, my mother's trembling silence, Claire's shining perfection, the endless cycle of being the one to fix, soothe, smooth, apologize. But today felt different. Today I wasn't reacting. I was moving with intention. At around 9 a.m., I received an email from Anthony confirming our meeting for noon at his downtown office. Seeing his name pop up on the screen made my stomach twist, but it wasn't dread, it was anticipation. The kind you feel before stepping onto a stage you've been preparing for your entire life. I arrived early. His office was on the 10th floor of a modest building, a place that smelled faintly of old books, lemon cleaner, and quiet negotiations. I found myself sitting across from him in a small conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Sunlight spilled across the table, illuminating stacks of documents he'd gathered for our discussion. "Thank you for coming," he said as he sat down, adjusting his glasses. His tone remained calm, professional, but there was a softness beneath it. "How are you holding up?" I hesitated. "It depends on the hour." "I understand," he said gently. "Let's take this step by step." He opened the top folder and turned it toward me. The first page was a scanned copy of the refinance document from 10 years ago, my name printed clearly beneath the bold title, Primary Owner, Elise Warren. Seeing it in black and white hit me harder than his voicemail had. The letters of my name felt heavy, weighted with a truth I had been blind to for a decade. "Your father's attorney sent over their proposal this morning," Anthony said. "They're requesting that you sign full refinancing ownership to your father, effectively forfeiting your rights." Of course, that's what they wanted. In their world, problems were solved by removing me from the equation. He slid another sheet toward me, dense with legal language, but its meaning unmistakable. "My father was asking me to erase myself." "Do you know what happens if I refuse?" I asked quietly. Anthony nodded. "Without your cooperation, the foreclosure process will continue. They'll lose the house." Lose the house. That phrase felt surreal, distant, like a plot from someone else's life. But it wasn't. It was mine. It was theirs. It was the soil from which every wound in our family had grown. "And if I agree to transfer ownership, they keep the house," he said. "But you give up all legal rights and your credit may be impacted again depending on what the bank decides next." In other words, I would be sacrificing myself again. My chest tightened with a familiar ache, the urge to fix everything even at my own expense. It was instinctual, automatic. But then I remembered my father's voice on the phone. "You owe us." No, I didn't. "This isn't just about property," I whispered. "This is about what they've always expected from me." Anthony nodded, his expression tinged with sympathy. "You're not wrong." We sat in silence for a moment. The hum of the city outside felt distant, muted. My heartbeat echoed through me, steady but weighted. "I don't want revenge," I said more to myself than to him. "I don't want to destroy them." "I know," he replied. "But you also don't have to destroy yourself to save them." His words landed like a soft, steadying hand on my shoulder. "Let me ask you something," he said, leaning forward. "What do you want?" For the first time without thinking about them, "What do you want?" The question stunned me. No one had ever asked me that before. Not like this. Not without twisting it into a plea or a demand. Not without qualifying it with their own expectations. What did I want? I closed my eyes. I saw the house, not the structure, but the memories. The good ones, the bad ones, the ones that shaped me. I saw the girl I used to be sitting under the oak tree in the backyard, wondering why she felt like the only one invisible in her own home. I saw my father's disappointment, my mother's silence, Claire's unintentional shadow. But I also saw myself as I was now sitting in a sunlit room, finally brave enough to stop running from the truth. "What I want," I said slowly, opening my eyes, "is not to be held hostage by them anymore. Not emotionally, not financially, not legally." Anthony nodded. "Then I think you already know your answer." I didn't speak for a moment. My hands felt lighter somehow, but my heart felt heavy. A heaviness that wasn't despair, but release. "I'm not signing their documents," I said finally. It was the quietest decision of my life, and the most powerful. Anthony exhaled softly as if relieved for me. "I'll notify their attorney." A cold ripple spread through me at the thought of their reaction. The yelling, the accusations, the dramatic catastrophizing, the guilt they would hurl at me like stones. I braced myself for all of it. But for once I wasn't afraid. After our meeting, I walked out of the building and onto the busy sidewalk. The winter sun glinted off windshields and glass windows, scattering reflections everywhere. People brushed past me laughing, talking, living ordinary lives. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt like I was one of them, not trapped in my family's script, not bound by their expectations, not the girl forever waiting for someone to say, "We're proud of you." I walked without a destination, just letting my feet carry me. Around noon, my phone rang. I recognized the number instantly. My father. A knot tightened in my stomach, but it wasn't fear, it was resolve. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I declined the call. He called again, declined. A third time, declined. After the fourth, he left a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. Somewhere deep inside, the 16-year-old version of me whose letter I'd read the night before smiled softly proudly. I kept walking. I didn't owe them my panic. I didn't owe them my obedience. I didn't owe them my destruction. For once in my life, I owed something to myself. When I finally returned home, the apartment felt different. Like the air had shifted, softened, stretched to make room for the version of me that had walked back through the door. I sat down at the window, pulled my knees to my chest, and looked out at the city. Cars moved below like little flickers of new beginnings. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Not safe, not settled, not healed, but free. And freedom, I realized, is where healing begins. The voicemail icon on my phone stayed there all afternoon, small, insistent, pulsing like a living thing. I refused to click it, but its presence was enough to keep my heart beating in a strange rhythm. Not out of fear, not out of guilt, but out of the unfamiliar weight of choosing myself. It was heavier than obedience, heavier than silence, but in a way that felt like lifting something for the first time, awkward, shaky, but necessary. Near evening, the sky began to bruise from deep blue into violet. I sat by the window again, the city lights blinking awake one by one. Everything outside continued without hesitation, cars honking, pedestrians, bundled in coats, life moving forward. And for once, I felt like I wasn't lagging behind it. My phone buzzed again. A text from Claire. Dad is furious. Mom is crying. They said you're being cruel. I'm not taking sides. I just want you to be okay. I stared at the message, letting the familiar ache rise and then dissolve. Their pain no longer dictated my reality. I typed back. I'm okay, I promise. Take care of yourself tonight. She didn't reply. I didn't expect her to. I spent the next hour reorganizing my workspace, something mundane and tactile to pull me away from the storm outside. I rearranged camera lenses, wiped dust off my desk, organized memory cards in their small protective cases. My hands moved steadily, but my mind drifted. Part of me wondered what my father was saying about me, how he was spinning the narrative. In our family, truth was always adjusted around his comfort. He was the sun, and we were expected to orbit him regardless of the gravity he imposed. But today I'd stepped out of orbit, and the universe didn't collapse. That realization alone felt like oxygen. Around 7 p.m., I finally played the voicemail. My father's voice crackled through the speaker, low-clipped, trembling with barely contained rage. Elise, this is your father. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're destroying this family. Your mother is a wreck. Claire is caught in the middle, and you... He paused, breathing heavily. You're acting ungrateful, disrespectful, selfish. Selfish, a word I had been terrified of since childhood. You will call me back, he continued, voice hardening, and you will sign the documents your mother and I sent. This house is not yours. It never was yours. You only have your name on that paper because I trusted you, and you're taking advantage of that. Advantage. He said it like a curse. We won't ask again. This is your chance to fix what you've done. The voicemail ended with a sharp click. For a long time, I didn't move. His words hung in the room like smoke, acrid, suffocating, familiar. So familiar that my body reacted before my mind could intervene. My chest tightened, my throat constricted, my pulse quickened. This was the conditioning. This was the old script. This was the version of me they had built, trained to fall apart when he raised his voice. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I pressed my palms flat against the table, grounding myself in the present. I whispered aloud, I'm not going back to that. And the words felt like an anchor dropping into the ocean. Minutes passed. The panic washed through me, then ebbed, then faded entirely. It was the first time in my life that his anger didn't own me. I deleted the voicemail. Then I blocked his number. My hands trembled, but my heart didn't. A strange calm washed over me, a sense of reclaiming something I hadn't realized was stolen. Not the house, not the documents, not even my autonomy. My peace. I didn't expect what happened next. At 8:40 p.m., there was a knock at my door. Firm, rapid. Not like Claire's gentle tapping the day before. My first thought was that it was a neighbor. My second thought, irrational but instinctive, was that it was him. But when I opened the door, I saw my mother. She stood there, bundled in a beige coat, her shoulders small, her eyes red-rimmed. Her hands shook as she clutched her purse strap. She looked older than I remembered, frailer. Mom, I breathed. She swallowed hard. Elise, can I come in? I hesitated, not out of anger, but out of the instinct to protect the tiny boundary I had only just begun to build. But something about her trembling hands made me soften. Yes, I said quietly, come in. She stepped inside like someone entering a church, moving carefully, as though she were afraid to disturb anything. She sat at the table, her posture collapsed, her breath shallow. For the first time in my life, she looked like the child, and I looked like the adult. Elise, she whispered, voice cracking, your father is... He's very upset. I know, I said. He called. He told me, she murmured, looking down. I waited. She twisted her fingers together, something she'd done all my life when she was afraid. He thinks you're doing this to hurt him. I'm not. She nodded, but tears filled her eyes. But he doesn't understand why you won't help. I took a breath, slow, steady. Because I've helped my whole life, Mom. Helping is the only thing I've ever done. Her face crumpled. I know. She wiped her cheek quickly, ashamed of the tear. Then why didn't you ever say anything? I asked gently. Why didn't you stand up for me even once? Her chin trembled. Because I was scared. And there it was, the truth. The one truth I had known instinctively for decades but had never heard spoken aloud. She wasn't weak, she wasn't indifferent, she was terrified. I was scared of making him angry, she whispered, of losing what little peace we had. And you were strong. You could survive what I couldn't. I felt something inside me shatter something old and brittle. I had been their emotional shield, their buffer, their sacrifice. Mom, I said softly, just because I survived it doesn't mean it didn't hurt. She covered her mouth with her hand as a sob escaped her. I know. I'm so sorry, Elise. I should have done better. I should have protected you. The apology I had wanted for so long fell between us like a fragile offering. I sat down across from her. Mom, I whispered, I can't fix the house. I can't fix Dad. I can't fix decades of choices I never made. She nodded slowly, painfully. But I can fix this, I said gently. I can fix me. And that means saying no. Her eyes widened with something like acceptance and heartbreak. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, she said, he's going to hate you for this. I know, I replied. Are you prepared for that? I lifted my chin. Yes. She let out a trembling breath. I'm not sure I am. That confession undid me in a different way. Because for the first time, she wasn't speaking as my mother. She was speaking as a woman trapped in a life she didn't know how to escape. I reached across the table and took her hand, hers cold, mine warm. Mom, I whispered, you don't have to choose him forever. She cried silently, shoulders shaking. After a long, long time, she whispered, I'm proud of you. The words hit me like sunlight after years of winter. I didn't sob. I didn't tremble. I didn't collapse the way I imagined I might. I just let the words enter me, settle, and heal something deep and ancient inside my chest. When she finally left, the apartment felt quiet again, but not empty. I sat in that stillness, letting her apology and her truth and her fragility wrap around me like a soft blanket. For the first time, I wasn't mourning what she wasn't. I was accepting what she was. Flawed, frightened, human, trying. And I realized that was enough. The night stretched on quiet and full of possibility. I didn't know what the future would bring, whether my father would escalate, whether the house would fall, whether the fractures in our family would heal or split for good. But I knew one thing. I had chosen myself. And whatever came next, I would meet it standing. My apartment felt impossibly still after my mother left, as if the air itself were holding its breath. I sat there for a long while, the echo of her apology circling my thoughts like a soft but persistent breeze. I'm proud of you. I'd waited my whole life to hear those words, and yet hearing them now when everything felt like it was burning down around us felt both healing and unbearably sad. I didn't move for several minutes. My hands rested loosely on the table, palms open, as though part of me still expected her to walk back in and say something more. But the door stayed closed. The apartment stayed quiet. And I felt something loosen inside me, something that had been clenched for decades. A daughter's longing. For so long I had twisted myself into every shape imaginable just to hear what she'd said tonight. And now that I had the longing, didn't disappear. But it shifted, softened, became something gentler, something mournful instead of desperate. The clock ticked past 9. I poured myself a glass of water and took a slow sip. My throat still ached from holding back emotion. I walked to the window, watching headlights drift by on the street below like wandering souls. My father would escalate now. I knew him well enough to understand that apologies didn't come from him, but pressure did. He'd push. He'd twist. He'd find new angles to make me feel small, irresponsible, destructive. He'd weaponize memories, guilt, love, whatever he had left. But I wasn't standing unarmed this time. I'd built something thin, trembling but real. A boundary. It was fragile, yes. It felt like a thin glass wall between me and the storm outside, but it was still a wall. And for now, that was enough. At around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Claire. Mom said she came to see you. Is everything okay? I typed back. It's complicated, but we talked. It helped. A moment later, I'm glad. I love you. Try to get some rest, okay? I stared at the message longer than I expected, warmed by her softness, her effort. Even in her fears and hesitations, Claire was trying. And trying mattered. But sleep didn't come easily. When I finally climbed into bed, the sheets felt cold against my skin. My mind churned with everything that had unfolded: the voicemail, the confrontation, the apology I never thought I'd receive. I lay awake listening to the creaks of the building, the distant hum of nighttime traffic, the rhythm of my own breathing. The past had a way of replaying itself at night, especially when its grip was loosening. In the dark, memories resurfaced, the kind lodged too deeply to ignore. I remembered being 8, watching my parents argue in the kitchen. My mother's voice, a trembling whisper. My father's, a sharp, scathing blade. I'd stood in the hallway with Claire behind me, shielding her from the heat of his words. Even then, I had felt responsible. Even then, I'd stepped forward first, absorbing the fire. I remembered being 16, sitting at the dining table while he criticized my grades in front of visiting relatives, turning my achievements into punchlines to make himself appear larger. I'd laughed along, pretending it didn't sting. I remembered being 19, telling him I got into a photography program, and he'd said, "Well, I suppose someone has to chase the useless dreams." I remembered sitting alone in my dorm hallway late that night, crying quietly, because even when I achieved something, it still wasn't enough. But the memory that surfaced with startling clarity, sharp, vivid, painful, was of me at 24, standing in the bank lobby signing those refinance documents. I remembered the pen shaking in my hand. I remembered my father standing beside me, not proud, not grateful, just impatient. "Don't make this complicated," he'd said, "just sign." And I had. Not because I understood, but because I wanted to believe signing meant belonging. That helping meant being loved. That saving their house somehow proved my worth. I almost laughed in the dark of my bedroom, but the sound came out hollow. For a long time I thought that moment was a show of loyalty. Now I understood it was the moment I handed them the weapon they'd try to use against me a decade later. But it had become my tool instead. I didn't drift into sleep until nearly 3, and even then it was thin and restless. When the morning sun finally broke through, my eyes burned with exhaustion, but my mind felt strangely clear. I showered, dressed, and made coffee, moving slowly as though my body were adjusting to a new gravity. At 9:15 a.m. the call came. Not from my father, not from my mother, not from Claire. From an unknown number. My breath caught. I answered. "Miss Warren," a brisk male voice asked. "This is Detective Rowe with the City Police Department. Are you available to speak?" A shiver traveled down my spine. "Yes," I said cautiously. "Is something wrong? I'd like to ask you a few questions regarding a report made this morning. Are you currently at your residence?" My pulse spiked. "Yes, what's this about?" He cleared his throat. "A member of your family filed a report claiming coercion, fraud, and threats related to property ownership. They stated you illegally obtained controlling rights to a house located at..." My stomach dropped. "They'd gone to the police." "They're lying," I said sharply, sharper than I intended. "Completely." "That's what we're trying to determine," he replied calmly. "We need to speak with you in person." "Is this serious?" I whispered. "It's standard procedure," he said. "We're not treating you as a suspect, but we do need your cooperation." My hands trembled. A cold wave rushed through me. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll cooperate. We can be at your apartment in 15 minutes. When he hung up, I sank into the nearest chair, heart pounding. They hadn't just escalated. They'd declared war. My father hadn't been able to regain control over me emotionally, so he'd moved to legal intimidation, to punishment, to retaliation. And yet beneath the shock, something else stirred. Something fierce. Something unwilling to fold. Something that felt eerily like strength. Because deep down, even through the fear, I knew one thing. I hadn't done anything wrong. Not legally, not morally, not emotionally. For the first time, the truth was on my side. My hands steadied, my breath slowed. I picked up my phone, called Anthony. He answered on the first ring. "Anthony," I said, voice firm, "the police are coming to my apartment." His tone shifted instantly into protective alertness. "Don't speak to them alone. I'm on my way." "I'll wait," I said. And as I hung up, the fear swirled inside me, but it didn't drown me. Not this time. Because everything he could take from me, he already had. Everything I was fighting for now was mine. My dignity, my voice, my truth. And I wasn't giving them up, not again. Not now. Not ever. The next 15 minutes stretched into something unreal, thin, brittle, humming with tension, like the air before a lightning strike. I stood in my apartment, palms pressed against the cool surface of the kitchen counter, trying to steady the tremor working its way through my fingertips. I could feel my pulse in my throat and my wrists, even in my knees. But beneath that trembling layer of shock, something steadier held me upright. I wasn't the daughter who flinched anymore. I wasn't the girl who apologized for breathing. I wasn't the scapegoat absorbing blame that wasn't mine. Not today. A knock sounded at the door, 3 firm raps, the kind that meant business. I inhaled slow and deep, then opened the door. 2 officers stood there. One was the detective who had called me a dark-haired man in his late 40s, with a calm, unreadable expression. The other was younger, blonde, and scanning the hallway as if expecting trouble. "Ms. Warren," Detective Rowe asked, offering a faint, not unfriendly nod. "That's me," I said, stepping aside. "Please come in." They entered, the younger officer following the detective's lead. Both moved with practiced efficiency, but not hostility. They didn't put me on edge, they put me on alert. "Before we begin," Detective Rowe said, "I want to make clear that this is a routine follow-up on a report filed earlier today. You're not under arrest. You're not being detained. We simply need to clarify information." His tone was steady, measured, not accusatory. Still, the word report made my stomach clench. "What exactly was said?" I asked. He exchanged a quick glance with the younger officer. "The report included claims of coercion. Specifically, it alleges that you manipulated your parents into signing over their property under duress." I let out a stunned laugh, a raw, disbelieving sound. Under duress, I was 24. They were the ones pressuring me. "I'm here to hear your side," he said calmly. "Can you explain your involvement with the property located at..." The second knock caught all 3 of us off guard. Rapid, urgent. The detective straightened slightly. I crossed the room and opened the door. Anthony was standing there, coat open, tie slightly askew, breath visible in the cold air of the hallway. He must have broken several traffic laws to get here this quickly. "Elise," he said, voice low but reassuring, "I'm here." My lungs loosened. Anthony turned to the officers. "Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Miss Warren's attorney. I assume someone from her family filed a retaliatory complaint." Detective Rowe nodded. "That aligns with some of what we've gathered. I'm simply here to confirm details." "Then let's discuss them," Anthony said, stepping fully inside. "With respect, I'd like to be present for all questioning." "Of course," the detective replied. We all sat at the small dining table, me beside Anthony, the detectives across from us. My apartment had never felt so small, so intimate, so exposed. "Ms. Warren," the detective began, "were you aware that your name appears as the primary owner on the refinancing documents from 10 years ago?" "Yes," I said, "I only recently found out." "And did you sign those documents voluntarily?" The question hit me with its starkness. I closed my eyes briefly. Yes and no. "Can you explain?" "When I signed them, I didn't know what I was signing. My father pressured me to hurry. He told me it was just a formality. He made it sound like something I owed the family." I paused, steadying my breath. "But I didn't coerce them into anything. I didn't even understand my legal position until last week." Detective Rowe watched me closely, not with suspicion, but with a kind of quiet assessment. "Why do you think your family would file a report like this?" he asked gently. I swallowed. "Because I told them I wouldn't sign new documents to give up my ownership. And they're angry. Angry enough to falsify a report." I didn't answer immediately. But the truth was undeniable. My father would rather paint me as a criminal than take responsibility. "Yes," I whispered. "Angry enough." The younger officer shifted in his seat. Something softened in his expression, maybe recognition, maybe sympathy. Detective Rowe nodded slowly. "We suspected as much. There are inconsistencies in their statement, and their attorney has been evasive." Anthony spoke up, then his voice firm. "Ms. Warren has complied with all legal requirements. The documents she signed were valid and executed properly. Her family's accusations have no basis in fact." Detective Rowe looked at me again. "We'll be closing the complaint as unfounded." My breath escaped me in a shudder. Unfounded. The word felt like a protective wall sliding into place around me. But he continued. "I want to offer a personal note. When situations like this arise within families, they often escalate before they calm. I'd recommend taking precautions." I nodded. "I understand." He stood. "We won't take any more of your time. And Ms. Warren?" "Yes, you didn't do anything wrong." The words hit me harder than I expected. Simple, direct, true. "Thank you," I whispered. When the door closed behind them, the silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was cleansing. I turned to Anthony, exhaling deeply. "Thank you for getting here so fast." He gave a small smile. "You sounded like you needed support." "I did," I admitted. "And you handled yourself incredibly well," he added. "Most people break down during something like this." I looked him in the eyes. "I've been breaking down my whole life," I said. "I'm done doing it for the wrong people." He held my gaze longer than expected, his expression thoughtful, almost proud. Then he nodded. "Good, because you're going to need that strength." My stomach tensed. "You think they'll escalate again?" "I think your father doesn't understand the concept of losing control. And right now, he's losing it." I sank into a chair. "What do I do now?" Anthony sat beside me, not across, beside. "You keep doing what you've been doing," he said softly. "You hold your ground. You protect what's yours. You stay honest. And you let the truth do the work." "And if he comes after me again," I whispered. "Then we'll handle it," he said simply. "Together." That word "together" hit me in a place I didn't know was still tender. For a long time, no one had ever been with me. Not really. Not in the moments that mattered. I felt my throat tighten. I'm not used to that. "I know," he replied, "but you deserve it." I looked away, blinking quickly. As he gathered his coat and briefcase to leave, he paused at the door. "Elise," he said gently, "get some rest today. You've had a storm at your door, but you weathered it." I nodded, "Thank you." When he left, I leaned against the closed door, letting the truth sink into my bones. I had weathered it. Me. On my own terms. For the first time in my life, their chaos hadn't consumed me. Their lies hadn't defined me. Their fear hadn't dictated my choices. I wasn't the daughter in the shadows anymore. I was the woman standing in the doorway, watching the storm but refusing to be swept away by it. And deep down, beneath the exhaustion and adrenaline, I felt something powerful unfurling inside me, a sense of self I had never known before. A self not shaped by their approval. A self not twisted by their expectations. A self not bound to their history. I walked to the mirror, studying the woman staring back at me. She looked tired, worn, weathered, but she also looked unbroken. For the first time, I whispered to my reflection, "We're going to be okay." And I believed it. The rest of that morning moved like a slow shifting tide, quiet, heavy, full of the kind of stillness that follows a narrowly avoided collision. I brewed another cup of coffee, mostly out of habit, though I barely tasted it. My hands were steady now, but my thoughts weren't. They spun and slowed like a carousel, refusing to settle on one image. Every few minutes, I caught myself replaying the detective's words, "You didn't do anything wrong." It was stunning how foreign those words felt, how deeply I wanted to believe them, how deeply I didn't. In my family, being right meant nothing. Being innocent meant nothing. What mattered was compliance. What mattered was obedience. What mattered was pleasing the one person whose approval I had spent my entire life chasing like a mirage. Now, for the first time, someone outside that tangled orbit had looked at me, listened, and said, "You're not the problem." It was both healing and destabilizing. Around noon, the exhaustion began to seep in, not physical, but emotional, like gravity had suddenly doubled. My body felt heavy as I sank onto the couch. My mind wanted stillness, but a knot of unresolved tension throbbed in my chest. I had pushed back. I had stood my ground. But the storm wasn't over. A soft buzz interrupted my quiet. My phone screen lit up. "Claire." A text. "Mom told me what happened. Dad is furious. Please don't talk to him. Please let me come over." A part of me wanted to say no. Another part wanted to say yes. But I knew the truth beneath both impulses. It wasn't Claire I wanted to avoid. It was the emotional aftermath hanging between us like fog. Still, she'd been honest. She'd tried to understand. She'd stepped toward me instead of the family narrative. So I typed, "Okay, come in an hour." Her reply came instantly. "Thank you." I spent those 60 minutes putting away stray papers, wiping down the counter, fussing over things that didn't matter. My body needed movement. My mind needed distraction. The apartment felt too quiet, too full of memory and tension, and the faint echo of my father's voice accusing me of betrayal. When the knock finally came, it was soft. Not frantic like yesterday. Not hesitant. Just soft. I opened the door. Claire stood there bundled in a thick gray sweater, a scarf twisted protectively around her neck. Her eyes were already glossy, but she wasn't crying, not yet. She stepped in slowly, as if unsure whether she was welcome. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey." For a moment, we just stood there, the silence between us full, but not sharp. Something had shifted. We'd crossed a threshold neither of us could uncross. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands wrapped tightly together in her lap. "I talked to Mom this morning," she said quietly. She told Dad to stop attacking you." I blinked. "She did." Claire nodded. "She said she's tired, that this isn't your fault, that she won't let him blame you anymore." My breath caught. My mother, tiny tremoring, forever fading into the wallpaper, had confronted him. The image was almost surreal. I couldn't imagine her voice raised, couldn't imagine her stepping out of that long shadow. But maybe last night had shifted something in her too. "I didn't expect that," I whispered. "I didn't either," Claire said. She cried all morning. Then she told him he had to stop calling the police. She said she knows he only did it to punish you. Her voice wavered at punish. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the truth settle in deeper. He wanted to punish me. Not negotiate. Not discuss. Punish. That was the kind of father he'd always been, disciplinary, authoritarian, wielding power like a weapon. But hearing Claire say it aloud made it real in a new and terrible way. "And Dad?" I asked. Claire's face twisted. He yelled. "He said she was choosing you over him. He said you brainwashed her." A humorless laugh escaped me. If only I had that kind of power. Claire didn't laugh. She just stared at her hands. "I'm scared," she blurted. I sat beside her. "Of him," she nodded slowly. "And of what happens next." I swallowed. "Me too." She turned toward me, and for the first time since all this began, she didn't look like the golden child or the favored daughter. She looked like my little sister, scared, torn, caught between two people she loved in different ways. "Elise," she whispered, "he's not going to let this go." "I know. He'll try something else." "I know. And he'll blame you for everything." A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, as if embarrassed by her own emotions. "He always blames me," I said softly, "even when I'm not there." "That's why I'm scared," she said. "Because I don't want him to twist this into something that breaks us again." My chest tightened with a painful tenderness. "We're not broken," I said. "We're bruised, but bruises heal." She shook her head. "Not in our family." I took her cold hands in mine. "Then maybe we can be the first ones who do." She stared at me, stunned by the idea. You still want us," she whispered. The question hit me harder than any accusation. "Of course I do," I said, voice cracking. "I never wanted to lose you." She let out a shaky breath, then leaned into me tentatively at first, then fully. I wrapped my arms around her, feeling her tremble. For years, I'd thought I was the only one drowning under his expectations. I never realized Claire was drowning too, just in a quieter way, with nicer clothes and better grades, and a facade my parents found more palatable. We sat like that for a long time, sisters in shared grief, shared love, shared fear. Eventually she whispered, "What are you going to do?" I let her go and leaned back, considering the question. "I met with my attorney," I said. "The police closed the complaint." Her eyes widened in relief. "But I'm not signing their documents. I'm not giving up ownership." She swallowed. I figured, he's losing it over that. "I know." She hesitated. "Do you want the house?" The question lodged in my throat. Did I? Not the structure, not the debt, not the walls that held all our ghosts, but the truth. Yes. Not because of property, not because of money, not even because of justice, but because taking control of the house meant taking control of the narrative they tried to trap me in. It meant reclaiming a piece of myself they had tried to erase. "I don't know," I said finally. "But I want the choice, for once." Claire nodded. "Then keep the choice." Her words were simple, but they unlocked something inside me. A sense of permission, a sense of power, a sense of possibility. We talked for nearly an hour about our childhood, our fears, our father's rage, our mother's fragility, the way the house had shaped us differently. She cried. I cried. Not the dramatic sobbing of old wounds being ripped open, but the quiet cleansing tears of wounds finally being seen. When she finally stood to leave, her expression was still tight with worry. But there was something else there too. Hope. At the door she paused. Elise, whatever happens next, please don't disappear again. I won't, I promised. Not unless you want space. She shook her head firmly. I don't. She hugged me again longer this time, and then walked out into the hallway. After she left, I sank onto the couch, letting the exhaustion seep through me. My eyes burned, my throat felt raw. But something had shifted. Something important, something irreversible. For the first time since this turmoil began, I wasn't standing alone. For the first time, I saw that my mother was waking up. For the first time, Claire wasn't choosing comfort over truth. And for the first time, I felt the ground beneath me. Solid. Steady. Mine. I closed my eyes and whispered into the quiet. It's my turn now. And the room, the universe, the version of me I was becoming, everything seemed to echo back. Yes, it is. The hours after Claire left felt strangely weightless, as if the world had paused just long enough for me to breathe without flinching. I sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing in particular, while the light in my apartment softened into late afternoon gold. My body buzzed with exhaustion, but my mind was alive too, alive. Every moment of the last 48 hours replayed in looping fragments, each one sharp but necessary. I wasn't the same woman I had been before all this started. Something fundamental had shifted inside me, quiet but unyielding. And yet, beneath that newfound strength, a quieter grief stirred. A grief for the childhood I never had, for the mother I always wanted, for the father I kept trying to earn, for the family dinners that were supposed to feel warm, but instead felt like delicate stage performances where every movement had to be controlled, every expression rehearsed, every emotion measured. I had been the emotional vault of our family, absorbing everything, storing every unspoken truth inside me. Now the vault had cracked open, and I wasn't sure if what spilled out was light or darkness. It was both. It was everything. As evening settled, I found myself drifting into the kitchen, mechanically preparing a bowl of soup I barely tasted. I didn't realize I was crying again until a tear slipped into the bowl, disappearing instantly. I set the spoon down, wiped my face, and whispered to no one, I don't deserve this. Any of it. But the truth answered back just as softly. No one does. That's why you're changing it. After dinner, I curled up on the couch again, legs pulled to my chest, phone resting face down beside me. I didn't want to look at it, didn't want to see if my father had found another number to call from. For the first time in my life, the fear of him was giving way to something else. Something more powerful. Clarity. He could lie to the police, he could manipulate my mother, he could weaponize guilt. But he couldn't change the truth. He couldn't undo the documents, he couldn't undo the signature, he couldn't undo who I had become. Around 8, I checked my phone again. No calls from him, no messages from Claire, nothing from my mother, just silence. At first, the silence felt peaceful. Then it felt eerie. Then it felt like the quiet of a forest right before something steps into view. I pushed the paranoia away, told myself to take the win, told myself to breathe, told myself that sometimes silence was not a threat but a reprieve. But the truth was, part of me knew this wasn't over. People like my father didn't surrender. Not pridefully, not quietly, especially not to a daughter he'd spent 3 decades training to fear him. I turned on a lamp, casting a warm glow across the room. The apartment felt too empty suddenly, too echoing, too vulnerable. I wished Claire had stayed longer. I wished my mother had left with words beyond apology. I wished things didn't still hurt this deeply. But healing was messy, and I was just beginning. At around 9, a new message finally arrived. Mom. Just one line. Your father left. I froze, reading it again, then again. Left. Left where? Left the house. Left after another argument. Left her. I typed back quickly. Left where? She replied almost instantly. I don't know. He packed an overnight bag. He said he needed space. My breath hitched. Space. The word was so painfully ironic, I nearly laughed. My father, who spent decades controlling every inch of emotional space in our home, finally needed his own. For a moment, I didn't know how to feel. Part relief, part dread, part disbelief that anything could shift the ground beneath him. I typed, Is he okay? Her answer came after a long pause. I'm not sure. He was yelling. Then he got very quiet. Claire is with me now. I let out a slow breath. Claire had gone to her, that was good. My mother wasn't alone. But my father's silence, that was always the most dangerous part of him. His rage was loud, but his silence was volcanic. When he quieted, it meant he was planning, plotting, rearranging reality so he could still be the victim. For a moment, fear crept up my spine. Was he going to come here? Try to confront me face to face? Try to intimidate me into compliance? But then I remembered the police visit, the closed complaint. The detective's words, take precautions. And I remembered Anthony's voice steady and certain. You handled yourself incredibly well. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. Another text from Mom. He said you betrayed the family. The words punched me in the stomach even though I'd expected them. I replied, I didn't betray anyone. Her response broke me open all over again. I know, sweetheart. Sweetheart. I didn't know the last time she called me that. Maybe never. My eyes filled, but this time, the tears weren't just grief. They were something softer. Something like forgiveness, aching its way through years of walls. I typed, are you safe? Yes, Claire is here. We locked the doors. Locked the doors. Against him. That image shook me. For years, our mother had tiptoed around him, calming him, softening him, keeping peace like someone tending to a bomb. And now she was locking doors. The ground was shifting whether he wanted it to or not. Call me if anything happens, I wrote. I will, she replied. I set my phone down and leaned back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The apartment hummed gently around me, the fridge cycling on the distant siren of an ambulance somewhere, blocks away the faint rumble of cars on the main road. Life continued. And I was still here, still breathing, still choosing myself, still refusing to disappear. A knock jolted me upright. My heart thumped once hard. I stood slowly approaching the door on cautious feet. Another knock, softer, familiar. Elise, a voice called gently. It's me, it's Anthony. Relief washed through me so quickly it nearly made me dizzy. I opened the door. He stood there, hair slightly wind-tossed, coat open, eyes scanning my face with careful concern. Sorry to drop by unannounced, he said softly. You didn't answer my text. I blinked. I didn't get... He lifted his phone. I texted 5 minutes ago, just checking if you were all right. I glanced at my screen. No text. I must have missed it. I'm okay, I said, just a lot. His eyes softened. I figured. He stepped inside without assuming, waiting for me to close the door before speaking. I had a feeling today wouldn't be the end of things, he said. I wanted to make sure you're not alone tonight. The words hit me with surprising force. Thank you, I whispered. Really? He nodded. You don't have to talk about anything if you don't want to. I can stay 10 minutes or longer. Just wanted you to know someone was in your corner tonight. Someone in my corner. 3 weeks ago, the idea would have felt foreign. Now it felt like the smallest miracle. I exhaled shakily. I could use the company. He smiled, a gentle one, not overconfident, not pitying, just human. I'm here, he said. We sat at my kitchen table, 2 cups of tea between us, steam rising quietly into the stillness. The night outside deepened into ink, but inside the light was soft and warm. Anthony didn't push for details or explanations. He just sat with me, fully present, as if silence itself could be healing. And for the first time in days, the knot in my chest loosened. Not because the situation had changed, but because I wasn't carrying the weight alone anymore. Because even after the police, the accusations, the threats, I was still standing, still choosing myself, still learning how to be unafraid of my own strength. Eventually, Anthony spoke, voice low. You know, he said, you handled everything today with more courage than most people I've represented in 20 years. I stared at him, feeling something warm bloom in my chest. I didn't feel courageous, I whispered. I felt terrified. That's what courage is, he replied gently. Doing the hard thing anyway. I let his words settle, slowly, deeply, because maybe for the first time I was starting to believe them. And when he finally stood to leave, he paused in the doorway, turning back to look at me. Elise, he said softly, you're going to win this. Not because of the law, not because of leverage, but because you finally believe you deserve better. The truth in his eyes made my breath catch. He smiled once more. Good night. When the door closed behind him, I leaned against it, hands trembling, but not from fear. From the quiet shock of being seen, of being understood, of being believed. The night felt different now, not threatening, not heavy, but full of possibility. I turned off the lights, crawled into bed, and whispered into the darkness. I deserve better. And for the first time in my entire life, I believed myself. I didn't sleep much that night, even with the comfort of knowing I wasn't standing alone anymore. My mind was too awake, too aware of every sound, the radiator clicking softly, the occasional rumble of a car outside, the wind brushing against the building like a long, weary sigh. Each noise nudged me back into consciousness, back into that liminal space between fear and resolve. But beneath the restless layers of my mind, something steady pulsed, a quiet truth I no longer tried to silence. I deserve better. I must have repeated those words 100 times in the dark, letting them mend the parts of me that had been scraped raw by years of conditional love. And even though sleep came in fragments by morning, I felt strangely clear, as if something heavy had finally broken away. I made coffee without rushing, watching the steam curl upward. My phone buzzed twice, once with a weather alert, once with a promotional email, and yet my heart spiked both times. It would take a while for my nervous system to understand I wasn't under siege anymore, but I didn't let that stop me, not today. I sat at the kitchen table, notebook open, pen in hand. Something inside me insisted on putting my thoughts down, not in a dramatic let me record the trauma way, but in a grounded adult way, a reclaiming. So I wrote what I knew. I will not sign papers to save them from themselves. I will not apologize for defending my own life. I will not bend back into the shape they prefer. I will not disappear again. I will not let fear choose for me. I will not let guilt write my story. I will not abandon myself. When I finished writing, my hand ached, but in a good way. A way that said, yes, this is real. Yes, this is mine. Around 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, pulse quickening again. Mom. A text. Your father came home early this morning. He's quiet. Please, don't react if he contacts you. My stomach tightened, but I typed back, I won't. She responded almost instantly. I'm sorry, I wish things were different. I didn't type the first words that came to mind that I wished they were too. Instead, I chose something gentler. Thank you for checking on me. I'm okay, really. She sent a heart emoji, simple, small, oddly tender. The kind of thing she'd never been brave enough to send before. Then there was nothing, just quiet. And somehow that quiet didn't feel threatening anymore. It felt like space. The kind I'd never had in that house, the kind that allowed breath. I spent the rest of the morning doing small grounding tasks, laundry wiping down the counters, reorganizing my bookshelf. I didn't do these things to avoid thinking. I did them because they reminded me that life continued even in the midst of upheaval, because ordinary moments didn't vanish just because painful ones arrived. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I froze for a second, old fear gripping me by the wrist, but then I saw the familiar silhouette through the peephole. Claire. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying, her hair pulled back into a messy bun that had clearly been slept on. I opened the door immediately. Elise, she whispered. Come in. She stepped inside like someone stepping off a cliff, shaky, unsure if the ground beneath her could hold her weight. She didn't sit at first. Instead, she hovered beside the couch, wringing her hands. What's wrong? I asked, heart tightening. She looked up at me, eyes glossy. He knows you didn't sign. I swallowed. I figured. No, Elise. Her voice cracked thin as glass. He knows because he saw the police card on the kitchen counter. And Mom didn't hide it fast enough. Oh, I whispered. A small cold realization crawled across my skin. Claire's breath shook. He lost it. My heart sank. Did he hurt her? Claire shook her head firmly. No, not physically, but he... Her voice faltered. He said things, terrible things, things he can't take back. I felt my nails dig into my palms. What did he say? Claire swallowed, her throat bobbing. He said that you've always been a mistake, that you're punishing him because you never amounted to anything, that you're jealous, that you're trying to destroy the family on purpose. The words hit with familiar cruelty, but this time they didn't burrow inside me. They landed outside, ringing hollow. Because for the first time in my life, I saw them for what they were. His fears, his insecurities, his desperation, not truth. But Claire wasn't finished. He said Mom was weak for standing up for you. He said I was turning into you, and he didn't mean it in a nice way. My chest tightened painfully. I moved closer. Come here. She collapsed into my arms. Not carefully, not gracefully, just fell like a child who'd held herself upright too long. Her body shook with broken sobs, her breath hitching in uneven gasps. I don't know what to do, she cried. I don't know how to love both of you without losing myself. I held her tighter, closing my eyes as her tears soaked through my shirt. You don't have to choose, I whispered. Not between me and him. But you do have to choose you. Her sobs softened to small, trembling breaths. But he's our father. I know, I said, and that's why it hurts. We sat there on the couch, two sisters trying to untangle decades of conditioning with nothing but shaky hands and shared pain. For the first time, it wasn't me comforting her or her comforting me, it was both. Eventually, she pulled away, wiping her face with her sleeve. Elise, she whispered, he's planning something. I can feel it. A cold ripple ran through me. What do you mean? She hesitated. He kept saying he'll fix this one way or another, and then he said something about getting the law on his side. My pulse quickened. He already tried that. I know, but he said there are other ways. I breathed out slow and steady. I believe you. Her voice trembled again. I don't want anything to happen to you. I reached for her hands. Claire, nothing is going to happen to me, not anymore. I'm not the one who's vulnerable now. He is. She blinked in confusion. What do you mean? He's the one losing control, I said softly. He's the one grasping. He's the one afraid. And everything he's trying is backfiring. But what if he... I'm not alone, I said firmly. I have support. I have truth. I have the law. I have people who care. Her eyes softened. People like Anthony. Heat rushed to my face, surprising me. He's helping. Her lips twitched, the first hint of a smile since she arrived. He seems to care more than just professionally. I rolled my eyes gently, but my heart thumped louder in my chest. It's not like that. Not yet, she murmured, and a small flush crept up her cheeks too. Silence settled between us, comfortable this time, healing. Then her expression shifted again, turning more serious. Elise, what are you going to do about the house? I inhaled deeply, letting the weight of the question fill me, settle inside me, and then shift into something clear. Nothing, I said. She blinked. Nothing. At least for now. No decisions, no signatures, no battles. Her brows knitted. Why? Because the house isn't the fight, I said quietly. They think it is. Dad thinks it is. But the real fight is me reclaiming myself, and I've already done that. Her eyes softened, glimmering with something like pride. And then unexpectedly, beautifully, she whispered, Mom said she wants to leave. I froze. What? Claire nodded shakily. She said she's tired, that she's done walking on eggshells, that she wants... Her voice broke. She wants peace. A rush of emotions flooded me. Shock, grief, hope, fear, all tangled together. Claire, I whispered, if she leaves him, it changes everything. Claire exhaled shakily. I know. We sat there letting the truth settle like dust in sunlight. Then she reached for my hand, squeezing gently. Elise, I think you saved us. Tears filled my eyes, not from pain this time, but from the fragile, overwhelming possibility that maybe, just maybe, choosing myself had opened a door for them too. I shook my head, voice cracking. No, I just stopped sacrificing myself. She smiled softly. Exactly. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt like the chain around our family's neck had loosened. Not broken yet, but loosening. Slowly, bravely, finally. A soft warmth spread through me, not triumph, not vindication, but a quiet, humble kind of hope. A hope I'd never tasted before. A hope that whispered, this story doesn't end in destruction. It ends in transformation. A silence stretched between us after Claire's confession, soft, trembling, almost sacred. I felt it settle in my chest like a warm ember glowing, but fragile. My mother, wanting to leave, wanting peace. Those words felt almost unreal, like something whispered through a dream. All my life she'd been the quiet center of our storm, absorbing impact after impact, shrinking herself to fit into the small space our father allowed her. The idea of her stepping out, stepping away felt almost impossible. But then again, everything about the last few days had felt impossible. Claire sat beside me, fingers gripping mine. I don't know if she means it, she admitted. She said it in a moment of honesty, but she's scared, you know how she gets. You. I nodded. Fear can make people freeze. She looked at me, eyes soft, but it can also make them move. The truth of that landed deep. Fear had been my prison for years, but it had also become the spark that pushed me to finally choose myself. Maybe my mother had finally reached her breaking point too, the point where staying hurt more than leaving. I squeezed Claire's hand gently. If she really wants to go, I'll help her. I know, Claire whispered, her voice breaking. I know you will. There was so much emotion between us. Grief, love, regret. The weight of years neither of us had chosen. But for the first time we were facing it together instead of alone. She wiped her eyes. Elise? He's not going to let any of this go. You know that, right? I leaned back, letting the words settle. Yes, I said softly. But I'm not the same person he thinks he can control. And I'm not afraid of him anymore. Claire looked at me with a mixture of awe and heartbreak. I wish I were like you. I shook my head. Claire, you're stronger than you think. You came here today. You told me the truth. You stood up to him by being here. That's strength. She blinked back tears. I just want us to be a family again. Her voice cracked on the word family. We both knew how heavy it was. I looked at her carefully. Maybe we can be, I said softly. Just not the family he built. A different one. A better one. Her breath shook, but she nodded. I want that. I pulled her into another hug. Her body felt smaller in my arms, fragile in a way she rarely showed. Claire had learned to be the peacekeeper, the golden one, the buffer between my father's pride and the rest of us. But peacekeepers carry the most pain. They just carry it quietly. When we finally parted, her eyes were red but calmer. Elise, if he does something, anything, please promise you won't go over there alone. I won't, I promised. And promise you'll call me if anything happens. I will. She nodded, swallowed, and whispered, I love you. I love you too. She left with lingering hesitation, like she wasn't ready to return to whatever waited for her at home. And when the door closed behind her, the apartment felt full of everything we had finally said. Everything we had spent years trying not to say. I sank onto the couch and closed my eyes, letting the weight of the moment wash over me. My mother wanting to leave, my sister choosing honesty, my father unraveling, the world tilting in slow motion. I had always thought that standing up to him would destroy us, tear us apart, leave me alone. But what if standing up was the thing that finally broke the pattern instead? What if all those years of silence were the true destruction? What if this messy, painful, frightening unfolding was the beginning of something better? The thought settled like a small, quiet truth in my chest. I wasn't causing the collapse. I was revealing the foundation that had been cracked for years. Hours passed. The light shifted. Afternoon melted into evening. I tried to distract myself with work, editing a series of photographs, answering emails, checking deadlines, but my mind kept drifting back to the same question. What happens now? Not the legal process, not the family drama, not the next confrontation, but me? Who was I becoming? What did I want beyond this crisis? The thought was both liberating and terrifying. I had spent so long reacting to others' demands that I had forgotten how to choose something for myself without guilt. I had forgotten that my life wasn't meant to be lived in service to someone else's comfort. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts, my breath caught. I wasn't expecting anyone. This knock was gentle, hesitant. I stood slowly approaching the door with caution. When I opened it, my heart lifted and sank all at once. My mother. She stood there wrapped in her beige coat scarf, askew hair pulled back hastily. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen, her eyes, swollen cheeks, blotchy lips trembling with words she hadn't yet found. Mom, I breathed. Come in. She entered quietly and stood in the middle of the living room looking around like she wasn't sure she belonged. "Elise!" she said, voice cracking. I moved closer. "What's wrong?" She took a shuddering breath. "I left." I froze. "You left the house?" "No," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I left him." My breath caught like a gasp trapped in my chest. She swayed slightly and I steadied her, guiding her to the couch. She sat down, trembling. "I couldn't stay. Not after what he said. Not after the police came. Not after he blamed everything on you. I realized something." I sat beside her, my heart thundering. "What did you realize?" She swallowed. "That I've spent my whole life trying to keep the peace with a man who doesn't know what peace is. That I taught you and Claire to shrink, to be quiet, to apologize, to disappear. And I'm so, so sorry." Her voice broke on the last word. "I never wanted you to inherit my fear," she whispered. "But you did. Both of you. And I can't keep living in that house knowing I became part of the reason you're hurting." Tears filled my eyes. "Mom, you didn't hurt me on purpose, but I let it happen," she whispered. "For years." I took her hands gently. "You survived. Sometimes surviving is the only thing we know how to do." She sobbed quietly. "I don't want to just survive anymore." A deep ache swelled in my chest, an ache made of grief, love, and the fragile beginnings of hope. "Where will you stay?" I asked softly. She looked up at me with trembling eyes. "Here, if you'll let me." Emotion hit me so hard I had to close my eyes for a moment. The mother I'd always wanted, the one who saw me, believed me, chose me, was suddenly here. Broken, scared, imperfect, but choosing me. Not out of convenience, not out of obligation, but out of love. "Of course," I whispered. "You can stay as long as you need." She burst into tears again, raw, shaking years of trembling silence spilling out all at once. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her as she cried into my shoulder. "I should have protected you," she repeated. "I should have been stronger." "You're being strong now," I whispered. "Right now. This is strength." She clung to me, letting decades of fear unravel in my arms. And for the first time in my life, I felt something shift between us. Something like healing, pushing its way through bruised soil. After a long while, she pulled back, wiping her face. "Elise," she said, voice trembling but clear. "Your father will come here. He'll come looking for me, and for you." My heartbeat slowed, steadied. "Let him," I said softly. "He won't find the same daughters he used to control." My mother nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes. "You're both stronger than he ever expected," she whispered. "And then, I'm ready to stand with you." A tear slipped down my cheek. For the first time in my life, my mother wasn't standing behind me. She was standing beside me, and I realized something deep and undeniable. This wasn't the unraveling of a family. It was the beginning of a new one. My mother's words lingered in the room long after she spoke them, hanging in the quiet like fragile glass. "I'm ready to stand with you." I couldn't remember a time in my life when she had ever stood with me. Not when my father cut me down in front of relatives. Not when I cried quietly in my room after he told me I was wasting potential. Not when Claire and I were pitted against each other, molded into roles neither of us chose. She had always been there, but never with me. Until now. She looked around my apartment with eyes full of both wonder and grief, as if realizing for the first time that safety could look like this soft lighting, a scent of lavender from the candle. I forgot I lit the faint hum of a world that did not revolve around fear. She touched the edge of a cushion gently, like she was afraid someone might scream at her for disturbing it. And seeing her move like this, cautiously, timidly, made something tight in my chest open and ache all at once. "Are you hungry?" I asked softly. She shook her head. No, thank you. I'm just tired." "Tired is okay," I said. "You're safe here." Her lips trembled at that word, safe, as if it were a language she had forgotten how to speak. I helped her out of her coat, and she sank onto the couch, her back straight, as though she expected someone to reprimand her for relaxing. I draped a blanket over her legs. She smoothed it out with trembling hands, the gesture almost ceremonial. "Elise," she whispered, "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing." "You are," I said. "Mom, choosing yourself isn't wrong." I never learned how, she admitted. Not once in my whole life. Her confession cut deeper than she knew. Because in those words, I recognized myself, the version of me before all of this. The version who couldn't imagine saying no, who couldn't imagine being allowed to want something, who thought sacrifice was the only way to earn love. "But you're learning now," I said softly. She nodded, eyes filling again, but she blinked the tears back. "I'm scared he'll come here." "He might," I said honestly, "but I'm not scared of him anymore." She looked at me with awe, with grief, with something like pride rising unsteadily inside her. "I wish I were like you." I shook my head gently. "Mom, you left. You walked out the door. That's more courage than I ever saw growing up." Her chin trembled. "I left because I saw what he was doing to you, and to Claire, and to me, and I couldn't pretend anymore." "That's bravery," I whispered, "not weakness." She lowered her gaze, voice barely audible. "If I had been brave earlier, maybe you wouldn't have suffered so much." I took her hands. "If you had been brave earlier, maybe you wouldn't have suffered so much." She gasped softly, as though she had never considered that possibility. "Mom," I said gently, "don't blame you. I never did. You were surviving." Her eyes filled again, and now I whispered, "We're healing." A shaky breath escaped her and she leaned her head back, closing her eyes. For a moment, she looked peaceful, exhausted, but peaceful. The kind of peace she had rarely tasted in that house. But then her eyes opened again, worried. Elise, what about Claire? I don't want her caught in the middle. The irony twisted painfully in my chest. Claire had lived her whole life in the middle, in the tension between pleasing him and protecting us without ever being allowed to name that burden. She's stronger than we think, I said. She came to me. She told the truth. That matters. She loves you, my mother whispered. I love her too. She'll need us, my mother said. All of us, to get through this. I nodded. We'll be there for her. My mother exhaled shakily, and then her expression shifted subtly, but enough for me to notice something else stirring beneath her fear. Resolve. Elise, there's something else, she whispered. My heartbeat quickened. What is it? She looked at me with eyes heavy with a secret she had carried too long. I know what your father is planning, she said quietly. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? She swallowed. Last night, after he calmed down, he made calls. Many calls. He thinks he can change the story, that he can make you look unstable, unreasonable, vindictive. I froze. He's trying to undermine my credibility. She nodded miserably. He said he'd talk to the bank again, that he'd find someone who listened. He said if you refused to sign, he'd make sure they believed you were emotionally unfit, that you'd misled him, manipulated him, betrayed him. My jaw clenched, hard. He thinks if he tells enough people the same lie, she whispered, it becomes true. I closed my eyes, letting her words settle like ice in my veins. This wasn't just a father angry at his daughter. This was a man terrified of losing control and willing to distort reality to maintain it. Mom, I said slowly, thank you for telling me. She nodded. You need to be ready. I am, I said, opening my eyes. More ready than he thinks. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression almost reverent. Elise, she whispered, he's afraid of you. I blinked. What? He sees that you're not under his thumb anymore. That you're not intimidated. That you won't bend. And it scares him. I stared at her, stunned. He's losing the grip he spent decades tightening, she said. And he doesn't know who he is without that control. For the first time since this all began, I felt a strange shift inside me, not pity, not anger, clarity. My father wasn't a monster. He was a man built on fear. A man terrified of irrelevance. A man who mistook control for love. A man who thought dominance was safety. And now, stripped of that dominance, he was unraveling. Slowly, messily, desperately. My mother reached for my hand again. Elise! You didn't cause this, she whispered. You revealed it. My breath caught. She squeezed my fingers gently. And I'm done hiding it. A tear slipped down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. For the first time in my life, my mother wasn't apologizing for him. She was telling the truth. She was choosing truth. She was choosing me. She inhaled deeply, then stood gathering her emotions with trembling dignity. Do you have an extra blanket? I can sleep on the couch. A soft, warm ache filled my chest. You can take my bed, I said gently. I'll stay on the couch. No, she said softly but firmly. I've taken enough from you over the years. Let me have the couch. The shift in power, quiet, subtle, profound, brought tears back to my eyes. Okay, I whispered. The couch it is. She nodded, relieved. As I tucked a blanket around her shoulders a moment later, she caught my wrist. Elise, she whispered, thank you for giving me a place to breathe. I smiled through the ache in my throat. Thank you for finally letting yourself. She lay down, eyes fluttering closed. And within minutes, she was asleep, breathing evenly, deeply, peacefully. I watched her for a moment, feeling an emotion I couldn't name. Forgiveness, love, grief, hope, all tangled into one. I turned off the lights, then curled up in a chair across from her, unable to sleep, but needing to stay close. The room felt different with her there. Warmer, safer. Like we were two survivors rebuilding something tender from the ruins. And as I sat there in the dim glow of the lamp, listening to her steady breathing, one thought settled deep into my bones. The cycle ends here, with me, with us, not with him. Whatever storm came next, we would face it together, for the first time in my life. I wasn't the daughter standing alone. My mother slept a long, deep, exhausted sleep, the kind that doesn't come from rest, but from collapse. The kind a person falls into only when the weight they've been carrying finally slips from their shoulders. I sat in the dim glow of the living room lamp, watching her chest rise and fall, under the soft blanket, listening to the quiet rhythm of her breathing. It was steady, uneven at times, but steady. I couldn't remember the last time I saw her sleep without flinching at every sound, without bracing for footsteps, without anticipating an argument that might erupt at any second. The silence in the apartment wasn't empty. It was healing. And yet a thin ribbon of fear curled in my stomach, a soft warning that the storm outside wasn't finished with us. But for this moment here now, she was safe. And I was safe. And safety, I realized, was something we had never shared under the same roof. My phone buzzed on the table and I nearly jumped. The sound scraped through the quiet room like a sharp edge. I reached for it quickly, careful not to wake her. A text. Claire. Dad is asking where Mom is. My heart squeezed. Of course he was. Me. Did you tell him? It took a full minute for her reply to come through. Claire. No. He'll explode if he knows she's with you. I said I didn't know. I exhaled slowly, releasing tension one breath at a time. Me. Thank you. Her response came almost instantly. Claire. I'm scared he'll come to your apartment. My eyes drifted toward the door, imagining it. Imagining his knock, sharp, heavy, demanding. Imagining his anger spilling into the hallway like smoke. I typed, he won't. He doesn't know my address. But even as I sent it, unease rippled through me. He'd surprised me before. He could surprise me again. Claire. Just be careful. Me, I will. I promise. I set my phone face down again. The room grew quiet once more. My mother stirred lightly on the couch, murmuring something I couldn't hear. Her face tightened for a moment, then relaxed again. Even in sleep, she was fighting her ghosts. I crossed the room quietly and adjusted the blanket around her, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. She looked younger somehow, fragile but softer, like the girl she must have been before fear sculpted her into someone who whispered instead of spoke. I whispered, "It's okay now, Mom. You're safe. I'm right here." I knew she couldn't hear me, but maybe some part of her could. I made tea just to have something warm in my hands, something grounding. I stood by the window as the city night wrapped itself around the buildings, the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off the pavement below. My reflection in the glass looked tired, dark circles beneath my eyes, hair mussed, shoulders slumped, but there was something new there too. Strength. Not loud strength, not bold defiant strength, quiet strength. The kind that grows slowly like roots beneath soil. The kind I'd never been allowed to cultivate. The kind my father never expected me to have. My father. The thought alone stirred a mixture of dread, anger, and an emotion I didn't want to acknowledge: sadness. Not grief exactly, not yet, but a mourning of what could have been if he had been a different man, if he'd been capable of gentleness, if he'd seen me, if he'd loved me without needing to control me. A sudden knock on the door shattered my thoughts. Not loud, not aggressive, but unexpected. My heart slammed against my ribs. I set the tea down, my hands trembling. I glanced at my mother, still sleeping, and moved quietly toward the door. I looked through the peephole. Relief washed through me so fast I nearly gasped. Anthony. I opened the door with a shaky laugh. You're going to give me a heart attack. He gave me a small, apologetic smile. Sorry, I texted. You didn't answer. I glanced at the table, my phone still face down. I think I missed it. His eyes scanned my face, and I watched concern settle into his expression. Are you okay? Yes, I said. Then more honestly? Mostly. He nodded. I figured today might be hard. Thought I'd check in. Thank you, I said softly. He stepped inside quietly, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace in the room. His eyes landed on my mother sleeping on the couch. She's here, he murmured. Yes, that's significant, he said, choosing his words carefully. I nodded. She left him. He exhaled something between shock and relief. That's a big step. The biggest, I whispered. We stood in silence for a moment, both of us watching her sleep. Then he turned to me. How are you holding up? I swallowed. Honestly, I feel like I'm living someone else's life. Like none of this is real. But at the same time, I feel grounded. More grounded than I've ever felt. He nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what I meant. Sometimes, he said gently, the moment we break the pattern feels like the moment we break the world. I stared at him, stunned by the accuracy of those words. He looked around the apartment again. Can we talk for a minute? Of course, I said, gesturing toward the kitchen table. He sat across from me, folding his hands on the table like he was about to tell me something important. Elise, he said softly, I don't want to alarm you, but your father contacted his attorney again. My breath stilled. What did he say? That he wants to dispute the original refinancing? He's claiming you took advantage of him 10 years ago. Anger flared hot in my chest. I was 24. I didn't even know what refinancing meant. He won't get far, Anthony said gently. Legally, there's no basis. The documents were valid. They were executed with full notary verification. He's grasping at straws. I exhaled shakily. I figured. But he continued. I want you to be emotionally prepared. He may try to intimidate you again, or manipulate the situation. People like him don't give up easily. I rubbed my temples, feeling the exhaustion of the day settle deep in my bones. I know. You're not alone in this, he said firmly. Whatever happens next, I'll handle the legal side. You focus on taking care of yourself. And your mother. I looked up at him, grateful in a way words couldn't express. Thank you. Really. He offered a soft smile. You've been fighting a long time, Elise. Longer than anyone should have to. But you're doing it. You're breaking out of something most people never escape. His voice softened even further. And I'm proud of you. The words hit me like a warm wave, loosening something deep inside my chest. I blinked quickly, fighting the tears that suddenly burned behind my eyes. No one, no one had ever said those words to me without strings attached. I swallowed. I don't know what I did to deserve that. You don't have to do anything to deserve kindness, he said gently. Just be human. My eyes stung and I nodded, unable to find words. He stood then, taking a slow step toward the door. I'll check in tomorrow. Text me if you need anything. Anything at all. I will, I whispered. Before he left, he glanced back one last time. Elise, you're not breaking apart. You're breaking free. The door closed softly behind him. I stood in the quiet, letting his words echo in my mind. Tears spilled down my cheeks, not in despair, but in relief, in hope. I wiped them away and looked toward my mother, still sleeping peacefully. For the first time in years, I believed the truth my heart whispered to me now. We're going to get through this. Together. Finally. I sat beside her on the couch, pulled a blanket around myself, and closed my eyes. Whatever storm came next, I wasn't facing it alone. The apartment felt heavier the next morning, not in a suffocating way, but in a way that told me a chapter had shifted overnight. My mother was still asleep when I woke, a small curled shape under the blanket on the couch, her face turned toward the window where pale morning light filtered in. She looked fragile in a way I'd never allowed myself to see. Fragile but freer. Even in sleep, her shoulders were softer, less hunched, less clenched. I stood there for a long moment, just watching her breathe, feeling a strange tenderness I hadn't felt since childhood. A tenderness full of ache and forgiveness and something close to wonder. For so long I'd carried anger toward her, quiet, unvoiced anger that I buried beneath compassion. Anger that she never protected me. Anger that she stayed silent. Anger that she made us pretend everything was fine. But now I saw her differently. Not as a mother who failed me, but as a woman who had survived more than she ever admitted. A woman who didn't know safety until today. And understanding that didn't erase the wounds, but it softened the edges of them. I went to the kitchen and started making breakfast. Something simple: scrambled eggs, toast, sliced fruit. I wasn't sure if she'd want to eat, but I needed to do something with my hands. Something grounding. Something that reminded me that life continued even when everything felt shattered. Halfway through cracking eggs into a bowl, I heard her stir. Elise. Her voice was groggy, unsure. I turned. Good morning? She blinked at me, disoriented for a moment, then she remembered. I saw it happen, her body tensing with the weight of reality, the memories of the night before sliding into place. But then she saw me, saw the kitchen, saw the sunlight, and something in her softened. You made breakfast, she whispered as if the idea surprised her. I did. She shifted slowly, sitting up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. It smells nice. I smiled, something warm blooming in my chest. I wasn't sure what you liked these days. Her expression faltered, just a small flicker but full of meaning. I don't know what I like these days, she admitted quietly. Something about that confession struck me deep. A woman in her late 50s, so unsure of herself she couldn't name her own preferences. I wondered how many years she'd lived bending around my father's wants until she no longer recognized her own. Well, I said gently, we can figure it out one day at a time. She smiled, small, trembling, but real. We ate together in silence. Not tense silence, not heavy silence, but tentative silence, like two people learning to speak the same language again after years of miscommunication. Halfway through her toast, she paused. Elise, she said softly, will he come here? I set down my fork. Maybe. But you don't have to open the door. And neither do I. She nodded. I'm scared of what he'll do. I know. Her lips trembled. He called me names last night. He said cruel things I've never heard from him before. He looked at me like I was nothing. A familiar pain twisted in my chest. I know that look. She reached across the table and took my hand, something she hadn't done in years. I didn't know how much you suffered, she whispered, voice breaking. Not really. I thought I could protect you by being quiet, by keeping the peace. I squeezed her hand gently. You were trying to survive. I understand. She sobbed, once quiet and sharp, and wiped her eyes. I'm sorry I didn't see you, really see you. I swallowed hard. You see me now? She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I do, and I want to keep seeing you. That sentence, simple, ordinary, hit me like a tremor, because all my life I had wanted nothing more from her than that. We finished breakfast, and she helped me clear the dishes. Her movements were tentative, careful, as though she still expected to be corrected or criticized. At one point, she dropped a spoon, and her entire body flinched. It was instinct conditioned over decades. I stepped toward her and gently touched her arm. It's okay, I said softly. She nodded, trying to steady her breath. A moment passed. Then she whispered, he used to yell when I made mistakes, even the small ones. My stomach tightened. I know, Mom. She looked at me, eyes wide with fragile guilt. Did he yell at you like that too? The question unlocked something raw inside me. Yes, I said, my voice low but steady, often. She inhaled sharply, covering her mouth with her hand. Oh God, I never knew. I never saw. You weren't allowed to, I whispered. He made sure of that. Her tears came back hot and painful. I'm sorry, Elise. I'm so sorry. But this time I didn't let the apology break me. I didn't let it reopen old wounds. Because something inside me had shifted. I had been carrying her guilt for years, quietly, unknowingly, but now she was ready to carry her share. And I was ready to let it go. By early afternoon, Claire texted again. Is Mom okay? She's with me, I replied. Safe. A long pause. Then, good. I told him she went to the store. He didn't believe me. I frowned. My chest tightened with unease. Is he angry? He's quiet. Too quiet. My stomach dropped. Quiet wasn't calm with my father. Quiet was brewing. Quiet was plotting. Quiet was the icy silence before a storm. I typed quickly. Claire, please leave the house. Another pause. I can't. I think he'll notice. Claire, I'm okay. I promise. I didn't like it. Not at all. But I also knew pushing would only make her retreat. Claire survived by sensing shifts, by navigating currents, by making herself small enough to slip through cracks. That was her learned skill, her coping mechanism. But still, the thought of her alone with him made my heartbeat stutter. Please be careful, I typed. I will, she replied. I love you. I stared at the screen, resisting the urge to call her immediately. My mother must have sensed my worry because she stepped beside me, her hand lightly touching my arm. Is Claire okay? She asked. She's still there, I said. He's acting off. Fear flickered through her eyes, but she straightened her shoulders. He won't hurt her. He won't hit her, I said. But he'll say things. Terrible things. She nodded slowly. Words leave deeper scars than bruises. We both knew the truth of that too well. The hours crawled. My mother rested on the couch again. I paced the apartment, unable to shake the tension that clung to me. Every sound outside made me flinch, the elevator ding, a door closing down, the hall footsteps. At one point, my mother looked at me with a sad, knowing expression. You're waiting for him, she said softly. I swallowed. I don't want to be, but yes. She reached for my hand again, her touch, a quiet apology, a quiet promise. You're stronger than he is. Maybe, I whispered, but that doesn't make him less dangerous. Her eyes softened with fear and pride tangled together. Elise, if he comes here, I'll talk to him, she said. No, I said immediately. No, you won't. She blinked, startled. But I'm not letting him tear you apart again, I said firmly. Not here. Not in my home. She looked at me for a long moment, really looked, and I saw something shift in her expression. She realized this was my space, my choice, my boundary, and she respected it. Finally, she nodded. Okay. Around 5 in the evening, another knock came at the door, sharp, unexpected, too familiar. My mother stiffened instantly. Elise? I placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Stay here. I approached the door with slow, careful steps, pressed my eye to the peephole. It wasn't him. It was Claire. I exhaled hard, unlocking the door. She stepped inside, quickly closing it behind her with trembling hands. Her face was pale, her eyes red. She looked shaken in a way I had never seen. Claire, I whispered. What happened? She didn't speak at first. She just collapsed into me, arms around my shoulders, body trembling like she had run through a storm to get here. I held her tightly. It's okay. You're safe. It's okay. My mother rushed over, her hands hovering, afraid to touch her too abruptly. Sweetheart, she whispered, what's wrong? Claire pulled away slowly, her breath shaky, her eyes filled with something I could only describe as devastation. She looked at both of us and whispered, he's gone. My mother stiffened. Gone, gone where? Claire swallowed hard. I don't know. He just left. Said he needed air. Said he was done with all of us. He walked out the door with his keys and didn't say when he was coming back. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. The air in the room shifted, turned sharper, colder, thinner. Claire looked between us, tears spilling freely now. Elise, she whispered, I think he's planning something. A chill rippled through me. What kind of something? I asked slowly. She shook her head, crying harder. I don't know, but the way he looked at me, like he wasn't even seeing me. Like something in him snapped. My mother grabbed her hand. Claire, he said we betrayed him, she cried. Both of us, all of us. My heart pounded, hard. He said he'll make sure none of us forget what we did. My mother gasped. I felt something cold and electric slam through my chest. Not fear, not panic, but clarity. A clarity that whispered, the storm isn't coming, it's already here, and he's not going to leave quietly. I pulled both my mother and sister, closed my arms around them, forming a small circle. A fortress made of 3 women who had been afraid for far too long. He won't hurt us, I whispered, though my voice shook. Not anymore. But in the quiet truth inside me, a different voice whispered, be ready. He's more dangerous now than he's ever been. Yet for the first time, we weren't facing him alone. The 3 of us stayed huddled together in the center of my small living room, long after Claire's words settled into the quiet. It felt like the air thinned around us, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. My sister trembled in my arms. My mother's fingers clung tightly to mine, and Claire's forming a kind of desperate chain, as though holding on to one another was the only thing keeping us from falling back into the darkness we had just escaped. He said we betrayed him. Claire repeated, her voice hollow, shaking in a way that told me she was replaying every syllable, every expression on his face. His eyes, Elise. He didn't look like himself. My mother closed her eyes as though bracing herself against a wave. He's never handled losing control, she whispered. Not even small things. Not even small disagreements. But this isn't small, I said quietly. This is the first time he's ever lost all of us at once. Claire looked up at me, tears clinging to her lashes. Do you think? Do you think he would come here? My mother stiffened. He might. I didn't hesitate, and if he does, he won't get in. There was a steadiness in my tone that surprised even me, a strength that didn't feel loud or angry, just firm, solid, the kind of strength that grows from hitting rock bottom and finding bedrock underneath. I guided them both to sit on the couch, keeping myself between them and the door, the protector, something I'd been since childhood without ever choosing to be. But tonight it didn't feel like a burden, it felt like a calling. Claire wiped her eyes. You didn't see him today, she whispered. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't raging. He just stopped, like something inside him switched off. My mother's breath caught in her throat. That's when he's most dangerous. I nodded slowly. I knew it too well, the quiet, simmering fury, the cold, calculated silence, the way he would lean back, fold his arms, and speak in that unsettling, calm tone that always meant a storm was coming. But this time he had no audience to intimidate. No daughters to guilt, no wife to silence, no house to hide behind. And that made him unpredictable. Claire's voice broke through my thoughts. He said he'd fix everything. He didn't say what that meant. I swear, Elise. Something in him snapped. My heart pounded hard enough to feel in my fingertips. You did the right thing leaving. She shook her head, tears overflowing again. I feel like I abandoned him. I lifted her chin gently so she'd look at me. You didn't abandon him. You escaped him. She sobbed once, a deep, painful sound that came from the center of years spent trying to be perfect for a man who could never be pleased. My mother stroked her daughter's hair softly. Sweetheart, we didn't create this. He did. I saw the truth of that flicker across Claire's face, landing slowly, painfully, like a truth she already knew but wasn't ready to name. He'll come here, Claire whispered again. I know him. He won't just disappear. I know, I said, and we'll be ready. She stared at me, throat working. What if he wants to hurt you? He won't, I said, but inside the slightest tremor moved through me. Because Claire wasn't wrong. This was a new version of him, a wounded king stomping through his castle ruins, desperate to reclaim power. But I wasn't the same daughter who trembled at his footsteps, and I wasn't alone anymore. My mother rose slowly, walking to the window and drawing the curtains shut. The gesture was small but meaningful. She was closing the world out, not out of fear, but out of protection. Of us. Of herself. Claire finally steadied her breathing and rested her head on my shoulder. I feel sick. Not physically, just everywhere. I know, I whispered. I've felt that way my whole life. She closed her eyes. I'm sorry you went through it alone. You're here now, I said softly. That's what matters. My mother turned from the window, her voice trembling. He thinks we're all conspiring against him. We're not, I said. But he'll believe it, she murmured. He sees betrayal in shadows. And we're not shadows anymore, I said. My mother stared at me, studying me with a kind of quiet awe. Elise, you're not afraid of him anymore. I shook my head, not the way I used to be. She exhaled, overwhelmed. You're stronger than all of us. No, I said softly. I'm just finally done being silent. Silence filled the room again, but it wasn't empty this time. It was charged, protective, united. After several minutes, I stood. I'm going to check the hallway. Claire's eyes widened. No, what if he's not here, I said gently. I just need to check. My mother grabbed my hand, not stopping me, just grounding herself. Be careful. I nodded. I opened the door slowly. The hallway was empty, quiet. The hum of the building's air system buzzed faintly. A neighbor's TV echoed softly from down the hall. But there was no trace of him. No shadow, no footsteps, no sound. I exhaled slowly and shut the door. He's not here, I said. Not yet. Claire curled into herself, wrapping her arms around her knees. But he will be. I sat beside her again. And when he comes, he won't find the daughters he expects. My mother sat on my other side. We should call the police if he shows up. I nodded. We will. Claire wiped her cheeks. He'll say we're overreacting. He's not the one who gets to name the truth anymore, I said. A soft knock interrupted us. Our hearts all stopped. 1 beat. 2 beats. A tremor ran through Claire's body. My mother went pale. I lifted a hand. Stay here, I whispered. I approached the door, pulse thundering in my ears. Another knock, gentle, hesitant. Not his. Still, I checked the peephole and nearly collapsed with relief. Anthony. I opened the door quickly. You scared us. He took one look at my face, at my mother's visible fear behind me, at Claire's trembling posture, and his entire expression changed. Concern sharpened into something protective. Serious. Elise, he said quietly, I need to talk to you. What's wrong? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. It's about your father. My breath caught. He's trying something else, Anthony said. Something worse. A coldness spread through me. What is he doing? I whispered. Anthony hesitated, then said the words that made the room tilt. He's trying to make you legally incompetent. He filed an emergency petition. My mother gasped. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. My vision narrowed, my breath shallow. He's doing what I whispered. Anthony nodded grimly. He's trying to claim you're mentally unstable? That you forged the documents? That you're dangerous to yourself and the family? Claire cried out. No, that's not. My mother gripped the back of the couch as though her knees had gone weak. "He's desperate," Anthony said, "and he's escalating." My heart hammered wildly, but beneath the fear, something fierce ignited inside me. A fire. A truth. A strength he never anticipated. I looked at my mother and Claire, both trembling, both breaking, both healing, and then at Anthony. And softly, steadily, I said, "Then let him try. I'm not afraid of him anymore. Not in the way he thinks." Anthony exhaled, relief flickering in his eyes. "Good, because we're going to fight this." "We," I whispered. "We," he said firmly. "All of us." My mother took my hand, Claire took the other. For the first time in our entire lives, we were standing on the same side. And whatever storm my father was preparing, he was about to face something he never imagined. 3 women who finally refused to bend. Anthony stepped fully inside the apartment, closing the door behind him in a way that felt deliberate, protective, almost symbolic. My mother and Claire sat on the couch in stunned silence. I could feel the shift in the air, the heaviness of what he had just revealed settling over us like a thick fog. He filed what I asked again, not because I hadn't heard him, but because I needed the words to make sense, to fit into some shape that didn't feel as violating as they sounded. "An emergency petition for guardianship," Anthony said softly. "A claim that you're mentally unstable and incapable of handling your own affairs." My chest tightened, but that's a lie, Anthony finished. A desperate, baseless lie. Claire stood abruptly, pacing toward the window with her hands pressed to her forehead. "He's lost his mind," she whispered, voice trembling. "He's actually lost his mind." My mother looked as if she might faint. Her hands were shaking so visibly she had to clutch the cushion beside her. My father, the man who once lectured me for hours about responsibility, who shamed me for crying, who demanded perfection from all of us, was now trying to declare me incompetent. I felt a laugh rise in my throat, sharp, disbelieving, almost hysterical. I swallowed it back. "He can't do that," my mother whispered, voice cracking. "He can't." "He can file it," Anthony said gently, "but filing doesn't mean winning. Not even close." I sank into the chair across from him. "How fast does something like that move?" "Emergency petitions can be reviewed quickly, sometimes within 48 hours, he said. I felt the ground tilt beneath me, but he added, leaning forward, "They're almost always denied if there's no evidence." And he has no evidence. The police complaint was already thrown out. The refinancing documents were legally executed. You have no history of mental illness. You have no concerning behavior. Nothing he is alleging has any basis whatsoever. Claire collapsed onto the armchair beside the window, burying her face in her hands. "He's trying to erase her. He's trying to erase everything she is." My mother stared at Anthony with watery eyes. "Will the court come here? Will they show up?" Anthony shook his head. "No, this isn't that kind of situation. The judge may request a hearing. They may request a statement, but they will not issue anything without verifying the claims. And trust me, his claims won't withstand even the first glance." My breath steadied a little. "So he's just flailing?" Anthony nodded. "He's losing control and he knows it. This is an attempt to regain power, to scare you back into compliance." "It won't work," I said quietly. Anthony looked at me with something like proud acknowledgement. "I know." My mother began to cry softly into her hands. I moved to sit beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me like a woman who had held herself upright for far too many years. "Elise," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I should have left him years ago. I should never have allowed." "Mom," I cut in softly, "this isn't your fault. He made these choices, not you." She shook her head, tears streaming. "But you're the one suffering." "Not anymore," I said gently. "Not in the same way." Anthony pulled up a chair and sat across from us. His presence filled the room with a steady, grounding calm. "I need you to understand something," he said, looking first at me, then at my mother and Claire. "Your father is acting out of fear. He can't control the narrative anymore. He can't control the house. He can't control Elise. He can't control his wife or his younger daughter. So he's attacking the only place he feels he still can, the legal system." Claire wiped her eyes angrily. "He's not thinking like a father. He's thinking like a cornered animal," Anthony said, "and cornered animals behave irrationally. But irrational behavior doesn't mean he gets what he wants." My mother lifted her head. "What do we do now?" "We respond," Anthony said simply. "We gather documentation, we provide a statement if needed, and we let his actions show the judge exactly who he is." "What if he comes here?" Claire asked quietly. Anthony's expression hardened slightly. "If he shows up here, do not open the door. Call me. Call the police. You are under no obligation to engage with him." I nodded. "We won't." He studied me with soft seriousness. "You're handling this better than most people would." "I don't feel like I am," I admitted. "That's because you've had to survive him your whole life," he said. "Survival instincts feel like panic even when you're doing everything right." That truth landed deep inside me. My mother breathed shakily. "Elise, I didn't know how strong you were." I shook my head gently. "I wasn't strong. I was just quiet. There's a difference." "Not anymore," she whispered. Claire stood and walked toward us, wiping her face. "We can't go back," she said quietly. "Even if he apologizes, even if he says he didn't mean it, we can't go back to that house." "No," I said firmly, "we can't." "And we won't," my mother added, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Anthony stood then, slipping his notebook into his satchel. I'll file our response first thing tomorrow morning. And Elise, no matter what he tries next, you're protected. I want you to believe that. I nodded slowly. I do. He hesitated, then his eyes softening as he looked at me. I know this is a lot. If you need anything, I know, I said, feeling warmth spread through me. Thank you. After he left, the apartment felt both heavier and lighter at the same time, like a weight had shifted, not gone but distributed, no longer all on me, shared between my mother, my sister, and someone I never expected to lean on. Claire sat beside Mom on the couch. I sat on the floor in front of them, leaning back against the cushions. We were a small, messy, broken circle, but we were a circle. For the first time in my life, I felt us connecting in a way we never had before. Elise, Claire whispered, "Are you afraid?" I thought about it. About him, about his rage, about his desperation, about what he might do next. And then about me. About my mother, about Claire, about Anthony, about the truth. A little, I said honestly, but not like before. What's different? She asked softly. I looked up at both of them, two women who had lived in shadow for far too long. You're here, I said. Both of you. And that changes everything. My mother took my hand. We're not going anywhere. Claire squeezed my shoulder. We're staying, no matter what. I closed my eyes, letting their presence surround me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the shield. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the afterthought. I wasn't the invisible daughter. I was part of something real, something resilient, something healing. This wasn't a war between father and daughter anymore. It was the shattering of a generational cycle, and we were breaking it together. Whatever storm was coming next, we would face it as one. The apartment felt strangely warm despite the tension that clung to the air. The three of us sat close, my mother on one side of the couch, Claire on the other, and me on the floor leaning back against them. Our breathing slowly synced, three worn-out hearts trying to settle into the unfamiliar rhythm of safety. For a long time, none of us spoke. It wasn't silence born from fear. It wasn't silence demanded by someone's anger. It wasn't silence used as punishment or power. It was quiet born from exhaustion and connection. Like our bodies understood something our minds hadn't quite caught up with yet, we weren't alone anymore. Alone. Eventually, Claire exhaled shakily. I don't understand how he can do this, she whispered. How he can look at his own daughter, his own family, and twist things so far he believes his own lies. My mother's gaze softened with a sadness I'd never seen so openly on her face. He needs control to feel safe. Without it, he unravels. That's the only way he knows how to exist. Claire hugged a pillow to her chest. But why is it always Elise he lashes out at? My mother's voice grew tight. Because she's the one he couldn't break. The words hit me like the soft punch, unexpected and painfully true. I never rebelled loudly. I never screamed or fought or slammed doors, but I didn't fold the way he wanted me to either. I survived him quietly. I resisted him quietly. And he hated quiet resistance more than anything else. Claire wiped tears from her cheeks. He always acted like you were the problem. But now I see, you were just the one who stopped pretending. I looked down at my hands. I spent years thinking I was the defective one, the ungrateful one, the dramatic one, the one who couldn't handle his high expectations. My mother placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You weren't defective. Her voice trembled. You were sensitive, empathic, and he punished you for it. A lump formed in my throat. I thought being sensitive meant I was weak. No, she whispered. It meant you were alive. Claire nodded through tears. He trained us to see softness as failure. I exhaled, letting the truth settle deeper. They didn't know the half of it. All the quiet ways he made me feel small through comments about my voice, my work, my dreams. The way he'd roll his eyes if I hesitated. The way he'd smirk when I cried, calling it theatrical. The way he'd remind me I had no right to be upset because he was the one who worked hard. The way he punished me with silence until I apologized for things that weren't my fault. The way he made me feel like my emotions were inconveniences. But I wasn't alone in that anymore. My mother and sister were finally seeing everything I'd spent years carrying alone. A soft vibration from my phone broke the quiet. I reached for it instinctively, my stomach tightening. A message. My heart stopped when I saw the name. Dad? The three of us froze. I opened it slowly, my fingers trembling. Dad, we need to talk. Nothing else, no threats, no anger, just those 4 words. But somehow they felt worse. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Elise, don't answer. Claire leaned forward, eyes wide. Block him. I shook my head. If I block him, he'll show up here, or he'll escalate legally. I need to know what he wants. No. Claire almost shouted, her voice cracking. Knowing what he wants won't protect you. He'll use whatever you say against you. My mother nodded fiercely. If you respond, he'll twist your words. I took a slow breath. I won't respond. Not yet, not tonight. Claire sagged with relief. My mother exhaled shakily. Another vibration. We all flinched. Another message. Dad, you're going to regret this. All of you. My stomach dropped. Claire covered her face, shaking. He's losing it. My mother clutched my arm tightly. He's dangerous, Elise. I've never seen him like this. My hands trembled, not out of fear, but out of something deeper, something older. The child inside me who had learned to shrink. But then I inhaled deeply, grounding myself in the truth of this moment. I wasn't that child anymore. And I wasn't alone. I placed my phone face down on the table. It means he doesn't know what to do. He's trying to scare us back into place, Claire whispered. But what if he tries something worse? A knock on the door interrupted her. All of us jumped. My mother's face turned white. Claire grabbed my arm. Elise, don't open it, she begged. I moved toward the door, slowly, heart pounding, mind racing. Another knock. Soft, not aggressive, not like him. I pressed my eye to the peephole. Anthony. Relief flooded through me so quickly my knees nearly buckled. I opened the door at once. He stepped inside, urgency in his eyes. I'm sorry for coming back so late, but I needed you to see something immediately. My mother and Claire stood behind me, confused and frightened. Anthony reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded document. My stomach dropped. What is that? I whispered. The emergency petition he filed, Anthony said quietly. I got a copy from the clerk's office before they uploaded it to the system. Elise. He hesitated, looking genuinely shaken. You need to see what he wrote. My throat tightened. What did he write? Anthony handed it to me gently, as though the paper itself was too fragile or dangerous to be treated roughly. My fingers unfolded it slowly. Every word on the page felt like a blade, carefully sharpened, deliberately aimed. He had written, My daughter Elise has a long history of instability, emotional volatility, manipulation. She frequently fabricates events. She has alienated herself from the family. She poses a danger to herself and potentially others. Immediate intervention is necessary. My vision blurred. Claire let out a strangled sob. That's not true. None of it. None of it. My mother clutched her chest, her breath coming out in gasps. He's lying. He's lying about everything. I felt something inside me crack, not in the way of breaking, but in the way of shedding, like a shell splitting open. All my life I'd feared he would call me unstable, dramatic, emotional. All my life I'd fought to appear normal enough to avoid that label. All my life I'd carried the weight of his opinions like they were facts. But now, seeing it in black and white, seeing how far he was willing to go, a strange calm washed over me. He's terrified, I said, my voice steady. Anthony nodded. He is. This was written in panic, not strategy. Claire wiped her eyes angrily. He's trying to destroy you. No, I said. He's trying to keep the world he built from crumbling. My mother sobbed softly. Elise, no one will believe this. No one. I know, I said. But inside, something enormous shifted, a realization that settled into my bones. This is the moment everything changes. This is the moment the truth finally exposes the lie. This is the moment the cycle ends. Anthony placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. We'll fight this. And we will win. I need you to trust me. I do, I whispered. He looked at my mother and Claire. I need all of you to trust that this is his last reach for control, not the beginning of something worse. Then he added softer, men like him crumble when the women they control finally stand together. I looked at my mother, at Claire, at the petition in my hand, and something inside me solidified, strong, unshakable, resolute. For the first time in my life, I said, I'm not scared of him. Anthony nodded slowly. Good, because he's about to learn exactly who you are. My mother took my hand, Claire took the other. 3 women united, 3 voices no longer silenced, 3 hearts done with fear. My father wanted to break me, but instead, he awakened a part of me I didn't know I had. Everything in the room felt charged, like the air before lightning strikes, quiet, electric, holding its breath. The 3 of us sat there with Anthony's words echoing through the space, echoing through the wounds and the strength and the exhaustion of the last 24 hours. This is his last reach for control, Anthony had said. And I could feel it. Deep in my bones, I could feel the truth of that, the truth of how desperate my father had become. The truth of what desperation turns into when a man like him loses the narrative he's built his entire life around. He wasn't fighting for justice. He wasn't fighting for fairness. He wasn't even fighting for family. He was fighting for power, for the illusion of being the head of a house that no longer existed. When Anthony left, gently assuring us he'd check in early tomorrow morning, the apartment fell into a heavy, trembling quiet. Claire sat with her knees pulled to her chest, her face buried against them. My mother stood frozen near the kitchen counter, one hand gripping the edge as if holding herself steady in a world that had suddenly tilted. I unfolded the petition again, staring at the words. Emotional instability, danger to herself and others. Manipulation, fabricated events, the same language he had used my entire childhood, now written formally on paper, stamped, filed, submitted to a court. It should have broken me. It should have gutted me. It should have reopened every old wound I had barely stitched shut. But instead I felt an almost eerie clarity. He had finally said the quiet part out loud. He had finally revealed the story he had always wanted people to believe. He had finally shown how little he understood me and how little he cared to try. My mother approached slowly, her breath uneven. Elise, honey, I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to fix it, I said softly. But I should have protected you from him, she whispered. I reached out and wrapped my arms around her, letting her fold into me the way she never allowed herself to years ago. She clung to me, small, shaking, the years of silence breaking open in her chest. You are protecting me, I whispered. You're here. That's everything. Claire lifted her head, then tears streaking her cheeks. Elise, she whispered, do you really think we can win this? I nodded slowly, firmly. Yes, because we're telling the truth. And he's telling whatever he needs to feel powerful. She swallowed hard. I've never seen him this unhinged. That's because I said gently, he's finally losing the thing he cared about most. Claire stared at me. What thing? I took a breath. Control, I said. He never cared about love, or connection, or trust. He cared about loyalty, obedience, appearances, the illusion that he ruled his family with wisdom instead of fear. My mother closed her eyes and a tear slipped down her cheek. You're right, she whispered. He never loved us the way we needed. Maybe he loved us in the only way he knew, I said, but that doesn't make it enough. Claire wiped her face. So what happens now? I sat back, letting the final truth settle inside me. Now we tell the truth. All of it. And whatever happens next, we face it as a family. My mother slowly sat beside Claire and I moved to sit facing both of them. It felt symbolic somehow, 3 women who had lived in the same house, suffered under the same roof, carrying the same invisible scars, now finally confronting the one thing that had controlled us for years. We're not going back, Claire said quietly, almost like a vow. No, I agreed, we're not. He won't forgive us, my mother whispered. He doesn't need to forgive us, I said. This isn't about forgiveness. This is about freedom. The word lingered in the air. Freedom. Something we had never tasted as a family. Claire suddenly inhaled sharply as if a thought pierced her. Elise? What if he hurts himself? My mother stiffened in panic. Oh God. But I shook my head. He won't. He doesn't believe in harming himself. He believes in punishing others. They looked at me, searching for certainty. And he can't reach us, I added softly. Not anymore. His only weapon left is a story, and his story is falling apart. I stood then, feeling the weight of the moment, the shifting of years, the slow but powerful turning of tides. I want to say something, I said softly, and I want you both to hear it. They nodded, bracing themselves. All my life, I whispered, I thought I was the weak one, the sensitive one, the problem, the one who couldn't handle our family. I thought I was the reason everything felt fragile. And I carried that guilt like a second skin. My mother's face crumpled. Claire covered her mouth. But now I see the truth. I said, my voice steady. I wasn't fragile. I was perceptive. I felt everything because I wasn't numb. I noticed the cracks because I wasn't blind. I broke because I refused to become hard like him. A soft sob escaped my mother. And now I continued, he's trying to call me unstable because he can't call me controllable. Claire reached for my hand. You're the strong one, she whispered. You always were. I shook my head gently. We're all strong, just in different ways. I took both their hands, holding them tightly. And we're stronger together than he ever imagined. My mother squeezed my fingers. We won't leave you. I looked at Claire. She nodded fiercely. Never again. We sat like that, 3 women forming a circle of truth and resilience and something close to rebirth. And somewhere deep inside me, something long dormant began to unfold. Slowly, softly, like a flower that had spent years growing underground, now ready to touch light for the first time. I don't know what will happen when he realizes we aren't coming back, my mother whispered. I do, I said quietly. They looked at me, waiting. He'll break. Claire trembled. And then I whispered, he'll fade. Silence filled the room, soft, heavy, sacred. And for the first time I felt not fear, but peace. A fragile, trembling, beautiful peace. The kind that comes after truth finally takes root. The kind that comes when survival turns into living. The kind that comes when the cycle ends. The quiet that followed settled into the apartment like a soft blanket, warm, fragile, strangely calm. Not the suffocating quiet of our old house where silence was a weapon, a warning, a pressure in the air. This was a different kind of quiet. A healing one, a truthful one we created, not one imposed on us. My mother leaned back into the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes soft but exhausted. Claire settled beside her, curling her feet under her, her breathing finally beginning to slow. The tension in her shoulders eased with each exhale, as though she were releasing years of carrying emotional weight she was never meant to hold. For the first time in hours, I let myself sink into a chair across from them. My own breath came out shaky but steady enough to feel like returning to my body after being outside of it all day. We didn't need to say anything. Some truths don't need words. Some healing happens in the quiet. But eventually Claire lifted her head. What happens now? She asked. Not in fear, not in panic, but with quiet resolve. I inhaled. Now, I said softly, we live our lives without waiting for him to control them. She nodded slowly, taking it in like someone learning a language she never thought she'd need. My mother wiped her face gently with trembling fingers. There's something I need to tell both of you, she whispered. Claire and I looked at her. She took a shaky breath. I stayed with him all these years because I thought leaving would destroy the family, but now I see staying destroyed us far more. Her voice cracked, she swallowed hard. And I'm done sacrificing who I am just to keep the peace that never existed. I felt emotion rising in my throat, thick and unsteady. Mom, I whispered, you're allowed to choose yourself. Her face crumpled into something raw, vulnerable. No one ever said that to me, she breathed. Claire reached for her hand. You're free now. My mother nodded, tears spilling quietly. I want to be. I stood and kneeled in front of them, both taking their hands in mine. You are, I said, we all are. For a moment, none of us moved. None of us spoke. We simply held on to one another, three women who had been shaped by the same storm standing now in the same clearing. After a long silence, Claire exhaled. Do you think he'll try to come tomorrow? Maybe, I said honestly, but he won't find the family he expects. My mother lifted her chin, though her voice trembled. He won't find the wife he expects. And he won't find the daughter he remembers, Claire said. A slow, steady warmth rose inside me. And he won't find this girl he used to control, I added. They watched me, both of them, with an expression I couldn't quite name, part admiration, part relief, part heartbreak for everything we endured. I felt the truth settle deeper and deeper into my chest. He didn't break us. He just taught us how desperately we needed each other. My mother gently stroked my hand. I wish I had known sooner, she whispered. I wish I could have protected you. You are now, I said softly. She nodded, tears shining. I will keep protecting you, I promise. Me too, Claire added. And for the first time in my entire life, I believed them. I believed they meant it, and I believed they could do it. I stood slowly, stretching the heaviness from my limbs. It's late. We should try to sleep. Claire shook her head quickly. I don't think I can. Me neither, my mother admitted. So I turned off the bright overhead lights and left only the small lamp glowing in the living room. The warm yellow light wrapped around us like safety. We didn't sleep, not really, but we rested. My mother curled up on one end of the couch, wrapped in the blanket I gave her. Claire lay her head against my shoulder, closing her eyes but never quite drifting off, and I stayed between them, feeling the rise and fall of their breaths. It wasn't peaceful, it wasn't comfortable, but it was together. Together in a way we'd never been before. And as the hours passed, as dawn slowly painted the sky in pale watercolor light, I felt something inside me quiet for the first time in years. Not because the danger was over. It wasn't. Not because he had given up. He hadn't. Not because the fight was behind us. It wasn't. But because I finally understood something that changed everything. He was only powerful when I stood alone. And I wasn't alone anymore. Not ever again. Not in the ways that mattered most. As the first rays of morning light filtered through the curtains, I closed my eyes and let a deep, shaky breath flow through me, relief brushing the edges of my ribs like a soft, unfamiliar wind. For the first time since childhood, I felt like my life was truly mine. Not borrowed, not monitored, not shaped by fear, not justified to anyone. Mine. And even though the road ahead would be messy, painful, complicated, and tangled in legal battles and emotional fallout, I felt something bloom inside me. Hope. Gentle, quiet, resilient. The kind of hope that grows in the spaces where truth finally settles after years of silence. I looked at my mother and sister, two women who carried the same scars, the same memories, the same yearning for something better. We're going to be okay, I whispered. Claire nodded against my shoulder. My mother reached for my hand, and for the first time in the long, painful, tangled story of our family, I believed it. If this story touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you could take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach others who may need to hear they're not alone. And if you've ever survived something similar, I hope you'll leave a comment. Your voice matters here. Thank you for listening truly.